The cold roar of the green fork lingered like a ghost beneath Catelyn Stark's eyelids. In the darkness behind closed eyes, she still felt the river dragging her hair downstream, tugging at her braids as though it wished to unravel every knot her mother had ever tied. When she opened them again, the world returned in a spray of candle smoke and damp stone, and the sound of water resolved into the gentler hush of rain striking canvas overhead. A tent, she realized, someone's makeshift shelter at the fringe of a forgotten godswood. Memory staggered after her like a lame hound. The twins, Walder Frey's smile thin as parchment. Music turning to steel. Robb collapsing at her feet, the rasp of her own last breath, as a frayed blade opened her throat. None of it could be real. But the pain that braided through her neck with every heartbeat assured her that it was. She tried to speak. Air rasped across ragged scar tissue, issuing nothing but a broken croak. Somewhere to her left a lantern guttered, and beyond it shapes shifted. A half-dozen people in rough cloaks. The sigil she glimpsed on one sleeve, a gauntleted fist, surrounded by flames. The Brotherhood without banners had found her, resurrected her. And according to their priest with the kindly eyes, given her back a life borrowed from Lord Beric's last flame. They named her Lady Stoneheart, because her throat could scarcely voice Catelyn, and because grief had petrified every softer part of her. But the name felt alien, a stranger's cloak thrown over her shoulders. She was still a mother. Stone or not, her heart beat for her children. Sansa lost in the south, Bran and Rickon rumored dead amid the smoldering ashes of Winterfell, and Arya, fearless little Arya, last reported fleeing north with a bastard sword in hand. Catelyn clenched fists that ached with resurrection's chill, and vowed to the old gods and the new that she would find the girl. Days bled into weeks as they rode the rain-slicked trails of the Riverlands. Autumn leaves, mottled bronze and red, clung to thorny branches like failed banners, trembling whenever thunder rolled across low-gray skies. Anguish coursed beneath Catelyn's skin, but with each sunrise she wrestled it into purpose. Ride, listen, gather rumors, and ride again. The Brotherhood followed her grim will, as if the very river had appointed her its widow queen. They hanged Frey patrols from elm limbs, carved their sigil into indoors, and left half-burned fields behind them so every traveler would know that the betrayed wolf mother hunted still. From every severed tongue she demanded tidings of a slim dark-haired girl and a tall half-mad sellsword called the Hound. Some swore they had seen the pair sharing stew outside salt pans. Others placed them at the Crossroads Inn, where the king's justice once lost his head. Every tale contradicted the last, yet each stirred embers in Catelyn's chest until they glowed almost warm. By lamplight, she studied maps Robb had inked in more hopeful days, tracing with trembling fingers the roads a girl might take when hunted by lions and haunted by war. Robb's eager scrawl, secure crossings, banners roused on the Blackwater, brought new pain, but she welcomed it. Pain meant she was more than the vengeful wraith her followers worshipped. It meant a mother's heart endured beneath the stone. Sometimes at night she dreamt of Winterfell before the Ironmen came. Bran laughing from a tower window, Arya fencing with stick swords, Rickon chasing the direwolves until their howls turned playful. She woke each time with her scar pulsing, rain misting through canvas, and the hush of sleeping outlaws around her campfire. The Riverlands wore war like a second skin. Charred farmsteads crouched beside empty orchards, wells stood brackish and fouled, and bloated corpses bobbed in slow streams where fish once glittered. At an abandoned septi near Maidenpool, Catelyn knelt before cracked statues of the Seven, palm pressed to the mother's crumbled feet, and felt only a numbed echo of faith. The stranger had carried her across death's threshold. Perhaps that path could be walked twice. She begged silently, "Keep Arya alive. Take my voice, my sleep, my blood if you must, but let me lay eyes upon my girl again." The rain outside dimmed, and wind sighed through shattered stained glass like distant wings. One night, close to dusk, the Brotherhood captured a Frey courier bound for the twins. Under the glow of torches, he spat defiance until Thoros of Merpride opened a wineskin of truth with murmured prayers and sharpened steel. The man confessed that a red priest at the Trident had spoken of a girl who matched Arya Stark's description, seen headed west with a disfigured knight, rumored to have once served Joffrey Baratheon. West, Catelyn repeated, the word scraping through her damaged throat. West meant the Trident's fords, the woods beyond Acorn Hall, and the whispering leagues toward the inn at the crossroads. Her pulse drummed. She ordered horses ready before dawn. Their ride became a pilgrimage across ghosts of her past. On the whispering shore where she had kissed Ned farewell before King Robert's southbound cavalcade, mist clung to drowned reeds. She remembered Arya's small fingers knotting in her cloak as they waved boats goodbye. To the men gathered around sputtering fire, she spoke of none of it, reserving memories like secret heirlooms polished by thought alone. The Hound was a dangerous guardian, yet some strange corner of Catelyn's mind trusted Sandor Clegane more than any Frey or Lannister. He despised knights' hypocrisy, loathed wildfire, drank fear like sour ale. But he had protected Sansa in King's Landing, at least for a time, and if rumors proved true, he shielded Arya now. Catelyn's throat ached for words of gratitude that would never reach him. Halfway to the Trident, at a village gutted by sellsword fires, they found a body strung from a signpost, the corpse of a girl barely older than Arya, brown hair hacked short, a burlap sack pulled over her face. Catelyn dismounted in silence. Her bones locked until Thoros coaxed her away, whispering that the dead child was too tall, too broad in the shoulders, not Arya. Still, she insisted on cutting the rope herself. Her fingers were stiff. But when the cord snapped, she lowered the stranger gently and laid her among nettles, closing her eyes. Something within her loosened like thawing ice. Tomorrow, she would ride harder. The Trident greeted them with slate-colored water and morning fog. At Sherrer's ferry, a grizzled fisherman confirmed that 3 days past a scar-faced giant and a sharp little wolf pup had crossed on a borrowed skiff before vanishing down the western causeway. Catelyn pressed a silver stag into his palm. The coin felt too bright for such a gray world. She ordered her men to split, Angui and Tom to scout north toward Salt Pans, Thoros, Lem, and Jack Buller to sweep the villages feeding the King's Road. She herself would take Greenbeard and force silent archers along the wooded track toward the stone hedge. In truth, she feared leaving the main path again, but Arya had never favored straight roads. Their passage through the acorn-rich oaks was a study in half-light and birdsong. Catelyn caught herself savoring scents of wet bark, the pattern of hooves squelching mud, even the rustle of squirrels overhead, the quiet textures life offered between calamities. She realized with a start she had not noticed such things since Bran's fall from the broken tower. Long years of marching grievance had dulled her senses, until only tragedy could stir them. But Arya's nearness sharpened everything. Every mile removed one stone from the invisible cairn atop her breast. At dusk, they reached a ruined tall house, overlooking a bend in the King's Road. Smoke basketed from its chimney. 2 horses dozed by the hitching rail. One shaggy chestnut with a chewed ear, one taller courser bearing Clegan's sigil burned off the saddle leather. Catelyn's heart struck her ribs so hard she feared it might crack the gray flesh mended by Thoros' prayer. She signaled silence. Greenbeard's archers knocked arrows. The world condensed into heartbeat intervals. From inside came low voices, a man's gravelly mutter and a girl's exasperated whisper. Catelyn stepped forward before thought could halt her. She pushed through the half-hung door. The room smelled of broth and horse sweat. Sandor Clegane loomed near the hearth, bandaged and grim. Iron helm set beside a chipped bowl. Across the table sat Arya. Her hair was longer now, darker from road dust, but the shape of her frown, that fierce crackle in gray eyes, Thin's eyes, left no doubt. Catelyn's knees softened. Arya turned, irritation ready on her tongue for some trivial remark from her hulking companion, and instead saw her mother's silhouette haloed by dusk. Confusion flashed first, then horror, memory of the twins etched behind her eyelids, then disbelief so raw it trembled her lower lip. Mother. The word fractured at the second syllable. Catelyn tried to say Arya's name. Only a hoarse gasp emerged, wet with unshed tears. She took a step, then another, until she could reach out. Afraid her hand might pass through a dream, Arya stood abruptly, stool skittering. For a second they studied each other across a table marred by sword gouges and ringed tankards. Then Arya sprang forward and Catelyn gathered her into trembling arms. The girl's tunic smelled of smoke and river clay. Her hair held whispers of cedar. Catelyn pressed her cheek to Arya's crown, breathing her in as though the act alone might restart every faltering beat inside her chest. Sandor shifted behind them, chainmail chinking. 7 bloody hells, he muttered. But there was no menace in the oath. He eyed the bowman at the doorway and laid one meaty hand on the pommel of his sword, more from habit than threat. Greenbeard kept his arrow lowered. Recognition flickered between outlaw and knight like flint sparks. Both men had served causes that broke. The hush stretched until Catelyn, still cradling Arya, rasped, "He is under my protection." The words hurt, each syllable dragged from scarred flesh, but they rang with the authority of the Tullys of River Run and the Queens of Winter. Arya pulled back to search her mother's face. Tears streaked the grime on her cheeks. "They said you were dead. I saw." Her voice cracked. Catelyn's hand cupped the girl's jaw, thumb brushing a freckle she remembered from needlework lessons long abandoned. She shook her head once, a gesture heavy with things unsayable. Later, she would face the telling. Beric's sacrifice, Thoros' red magic, the cold that never quite left her bones. Tonight, there was only the living warmth of the daughter she held. They ate thin broth, thickened with barley, too choked by emotion to taste it. Sandor stayed near the hearth, eyeing every newcomer as though wolves might still leap from shadow. When Lem offered ale, he accepted, grunting thanks that sounded like rocks grinding. Arya sat pressed to her mother's side, fingers wrapped around Catelyn's sleeve lest she vanish again. Outside, wind worried through cracked shutters, scattering sparks across the sooted stones of the chimney maw. When the bowl was empty, Arya began to speak, halting at first. Then, in a torrent, she told of King's Landing needlework gone wrong, of Micah's death, of her sword lessons with Sirio Forel, of Yoren's cage of recruits, and the road north toward the wall. She spoke of Harrenhal's iron corridors, of weasel soup and jackins, 3 lives traded for 3 deaths, of nights sleeping beneath hedges while firelit battle haze painted the horizon crimson. She described the hound stealing her from the Brotherhood because he meant to ransom her to her mother at River Run, until rumors of catastrophe at the Twins sent them south. With each confession, Catelyn's nails bit deeper into her palm, fury and pride warring behind her eyes. At last Arya faltered. "I wanted to be brave, Mother. Like Robb. Like Father." "Wow," Catelyn answered with a broken whisper. "You are." She brushed hair from Arya's brow, tracing half-healed scratches, the thin scar along her collarbone. "You are more wolf than any song could hold." The words seemed to steady Arya's breath. Catelyn marveled at the steel that years of war had folded into her daughter's spine. The girl was sharper, yes, but unbroken. Somehow, amid butchers' fields and traitors' halls, Arya Stark had kept her soul. Night deepened, rain shushing across the tall house roof. Thoros and his comrades bedded down in corners, posting 2 archers outside. Sandor dozed upright against a wall, too wary to remove his sword belt, one eye half open. Catelyn and Arya claimed a dusty pallet near the back. They lay facing each other, close enough that their foreheads almost touched. Candlelight flickered across Arya's features, mapping new stories in the geography of her face. Catelyn found herself recounting Winterfell winters, how she bribed Cook to sneak hot pies into Arya's bed on the coldest nights, how Arya once loosed a scrawny cat into Sansa's wardrobe because she swore the creature was a prissy queen of mice. Each memory loosened another knot inside her until laughter, hoarse but real, slipped between them. Arya giggled, a sound Catelyn had not heard since before King Robert's arrival. It reverberated through the ruined toll house like bells pealing over River Run's ramparts. Exhaustion claimed them at last. Catelyn drifted toward sleep, with Arya's fingers tangled in hers. In that fragile drift she seemed to hear Robb's laugh, her father's gentle baritone, the splash of minnows in the tumblestone. She let the noises wash through the gray caverns inside her, until the chill that clung to resurrection receded, replaced by something perilously close to peace. Morning cracked open with a shriek of crows. Steam rose from wet grass outside. Sandor shoveled ashes from the hearth, every movement purposeful, as if labor might dam the tide of feelings he refused to name. The Brotherhood scouts returned bearing grim news. Frey outriders had crossed the Green Fork 2 nights prior, and now combed the woods for the hound, the wolf girl, and whatever prizes remained of the late young wolf's banner. Catelyn's jaw tightened. Arya's freedom would be fragile so long as Walder Frey's knives prowled the riverlands. In Catelyn's presence, half myth, half nightmare, would draw them like flies to carrion. She gathered the Brotherhood in a ring outside. Mist clung to their cloaks. When she spoke, her voice rasped but carried across the clearing. They would escort Arya to River Run, now under uncertain Tully command, then press the fight against every Frey holdfast that dared raise its colors. Sandor grunted at the plan, distrust plain, but said nothing when Arya slipped her hand into her mother. The band mounted at sunrise's pale edge. Catelyn rode beside Arya on a sturdy courser lent by Greenbeard. She watched her daughter's gaze roam the trees, taking in sparrows flitting between hawthorn boughs, the prints of deer in soft loam, the brief silver flash of a trout in a puddle left by the night's rain. Catelyn realized Arya had survived by learning to read the world as a sellsword reads coin. Opportunity in every shadow. A swell of fierce admiration warmed her chest. Their column wound through a meadow dappled with foxglove and wind-tossed thistle. As they crested a low ridge, River Run's distant towers rose black against a copper sky. A gasp slipped from Arya, part wonder, part trepidation. For the first time since the twins, Catelyn allowed herself to believe that a homecoming of sorts lay ahead, broken but breathing. She reached across the narrow space between horses and squeezed Arya's hand. Bone met bone, blood met blood, and between their grips, something unkillable stirred. When the sun climbed higher, a kestrel spiraled overhead, its cry a streak of silver against the blue. Catelyn lifted her eyes to follow it, and for a heartbeat, she glimpsed the impossible horizon her family's story might yet claim. The song was not done. Let the Frey send riders, let the Lannisters sharpen quills and swords alike. She would answer them with a mother's fury and a daughter's resilience, and the Riverlands would remember the day grief turned to purpose in the beating of 2 stark hearts. They pressed on, the road unspooling before them like a promise, each hoofbeat writing a new line across the ledger of loss. Behind them, the toll house returned to silence, smoke curling upward to mingle with morning clouds that drifted northward, toward Winterfell, toward the snows that had birthed both wolf and woman. The wind carried those clouds south until, in time, they would break and fall as rain upon fields yet unconquered, nourishing green shoots that had only ever known the taste of ashes. And somewhere amid all that turning sky, the wings of the 7 gods, or perhaps merely the wings of fate, beat once more in quiet, unyielding rhythm, keeping pace with the hearts of a mother and her surviving child as they dared, against every cruel stitch of the world's tapestry, to live again. Okay. Palmi. The road south of the ridge curled through a sea of tall meadow grass, the color of old bronze. The stalks hissing against armored calves as the Brotherhood's column filed down its narrow spine. Sunlight slipped between layered clouds, dropping mottled bands of gold across the procession. A silent archer, leading a dun gelding, Thoros riding bareheaded, red silk scarf fluttering like a candle flame. Sandor Clegane hulking at the flank, helm lashed to his saddle, eyes forever roving. Catelyn held the center beside Arya, the girl's horse tethered close enough that their knees brushed whenever the path bent. Each contact grounded Catelyn as surely as iron nails pin a plank, proof that this fragile reunion had heft, scent, warmth, and would not dissolve like morning mist. They moved at a pace just brisk enough to keep hooves from bogging in last night's rain, yet slow enough to leave time for noticing the world. Wind stirred ribbons of seed fluff from dandelions that Arya tried to snatch with outstretched fingers. A lark burst upward in alarm, and both mother and daughter followed its shivering rise until the speck vanished into an expanse of wandering sky. Moments such as these slipped between the regimented clank of gear. Breathing spaces in which Catelyn could relearn her child's profile, the curve of cheek that still carried baby roundness underneath travel grime, the exact tilt of head when Arya listened for danger. By midday, the meadow yielded to patchy stands of alder and ash. Thin trunks leaned at odd angles above a dirt lane hacked by ruts, so deep water pooled and reflected gray light. When the party halted to let the horses drink, Arya dismounted and prowled the perimeter, short sword in hand. Catelyn watched pride bloom inside her until it threatened to crack her ribs. A memory of the small girl who once braided straw into crowns was replaced by this quick-footed scout who checked each divot for tracks. The ache that followed was not grief, but something more complicated, an awareness of time's theft and time's gift entwined. Sandor stalked to the stream's edge, scooped a handful of water, and splashed his scarred cheek as though dousing embers. Catelyn felt his gaze flick toward Arya, then away. He had spoken little since the toll house, but in the hush between hoofbeats, a silent accord had woven itself. Until River Run, the hound would serve as the girl's shield. Perhaps gratitude might one day find room within Catelyn's battered throat. For now she offered him the only currency she possessed, trust unspoken, measured by how she did not watch him every second. They pressed on. Afternoon deepened, clouds sagged, pregnant with a second storm. Far to the west, Catelyn spied the distant skein of the Red Fork, where it split the fieldlands like a tarnished mirror. Her pulse quickened despite herself. River Run lay just beyond those waters, but rumor had flown faster than horse. Lannister gold financed the siege engines now ringed around her home. Frey banners snapped from makeshift towers, and the riverlords who remained free harried supply lines in desperate crescents. The fortress might open its gates at the sight of a resurrected Tully daughter, or slam them for fear she was some wraith conjured by their enemies. Which greeting awaited, Catelyn could not guess. Only one fact mattered. River Run's walls still sheltered some measure of her kin. Her uncle Brynden, perhaps, loyal smallfolk. The bones of her mother and father. And walls, however embattled, gave children a chance to sleep, without knives at throat. Toward sundown, the sky cracked, releasing rain in wide, cold sheets. Cloaks darkened to near black, and runnels sluiced down breastplates. They found scant shelter beneath the partial roof of a lightning-blasted sept, whose bell lay half-buried in rubble. Thoros coaxed a sputtering fire from finger-thick twigs while Lem propped salvaged planks to block the wind. Catelyn and Arya huddled in what had once been the mother's alcove, now merely a stone arch open to night. Water dripped through the ruined dome, tapping in a regular cadence upon a shattered tile between them. Arya produced 2 hard heels of bread from her satchel. She tried to split one, but the crust proved stubborn, so she bit off the end and offered the rest to her mother. The gesture, simple, almost childish, unlocked a rush of tenderness so potent Catelyn felt dizzy. She accepted, chewed slowly, and allowed herself the small luxury of remembering rosemary loaves fresh from Winterfell's ovens. Lightning revealed Sandor standing sentry beyond the arch, silhouette stark against the white flash. Rain ran down his mail like mercury. Catelyn's gratitude finally hardened into words. She rose, motions careful so as not to disturb Arya's dozing form, and stepped to the doorway. The hound regarded her, wary as a tethered bear. "You have kept her breathing," she rasped, voice nearly devoured by weather. "That is a debt I cannot count." Sandor shrugged, water flicking from his hair. "Girl keeps herself breathing. I only kill what means to stop her." Even so. Catelyn reached within her cloak, retrieved a silver brooch shaped like a leaping trout, the last token she still possessed of her Tully girlhood. Rain silver blurred its edges when she held it out. "Take this, not as payment, as acknowledgement." He stared at the brooch, perhaps weighing whether accepting would shackle him to obligations he loathed, then snatched it with a grunt. "Fine trinket. Might buy 2 good horses if we reach a market." "Mantaranawar." "Aye? Or 1 very fine bottle of wine," she answered. No wry smile could stretch her ruined throat, but the dryness in her tone carried through. Something flickered in his remaining eye, amusement's pale spark. He tucked the brooch under jerkin and resumed scanning the night. Dialogue concluded, yet a fragile bridge remained, built of bread crusts, tokens, and shared storms. By dawn the rain had fled east. leaving behind a forest washed clean, every leaf trembling under miniature beads of light. The road emerged onto higher ground, where half-buried milestones marked distance to River Run. Catelyn's heart beat to the cadence of numbers. 7 leagues, then 5, then 3. Each milestone carved by stonemasons long dead offered the comfort of certainty. Something this war had made scarce. Near midday, Greenbeard, scouting ahead, signaled all to ground. He crawled back through underbrush slick with last night's rain and knelt beside Catelyn, drawing lines in mud. A patrol of perhaps 20 Frey riders occupied the next bottleneck, where the track funneled between twin granite shoulders. Banner, twin towers on gray. Intent, blockade. Arya crouched low to study the sketch, mouth a tight line. Sandor hovered behind, one gauntleted fist tapping the haft of his long knife. Thoros whispered a plan. Send 2 archers to the ridge, feign withdrawal. Draw the Freys into ambush. But Catelyn raised her hand for silence. It had taken one night with Arya to realize her daughter's mind braided possibility quicker than most men could string bow. A barn owl hoots just after dusk, Arya murmured, recalling something she and Micah had once used during games. Everyone stared. She pointed to the mud map, to a clutch of narrow birches along the granite wall. Their horses must pass single file here. Wet stone will be slick. If we drop pine needles over the ridge, the path turns to grease. 1 owl call, that's our signal to push rocks down from above. They'll scramble, break formation. Then we strike. Thoros' eyebrows rose. Needles and gravity. The gods love simple truths. Catelyn studied the path and nodded. Do it. She did not ask how a child learned sabotage. Winter had taught them all. Preparations consumed hours. Lensmen climbed the left ridge hauling sacks stuffed with pine litter fetched from the forest floor, while Sandor and Greenbeard guided 3 sure-footed archers up the opposite spur. Thoros arrayed the remainder in the pines behind the pinch point, bows strung, blades oiled. Catelyn and Arya remained further back, concealed within a thicket of young spruce, hearts hammering in near unison. Late afternoon brought the clatter of mail and the whicker of mounts. Frey outrunners emerged, their faces ruddy from earlier rain, lances bobbing like reeds. A sergeant at their head barked orders about tightening girths. Muddy track ahead. Exactly as Arya predicted, the column slowed at the granite cleft, horses picking careful steps. From the ridge came a soft owl hoot. A heartbeat later, brown pine needles rained down, turning stone into a sheet of slick decay. The first horse skidded, legs splayed, its rider cursed and hauled rein just as Greenbeard's archers loosed 2 shafts. 1 arrow punched the surgeon's throat, another pinned a bannerman to his saddle. Chaos erupted. In that instant, Sandor charged from the opposite shoulder, greatsword whistling. He split a rider helm to jaw, wheeled, and lopped a lance in half. Behind him, Lem's men vaulted the ridge, blades gleaming. Catelyn gripped Arya's wrist to keep her close. They were the reserve, intended only to protect each other. But when a panicked gelding bolted toward the spruce line, its reins trailing, a lone Frey clung to its neck. He saw them and kicked free, sword half drawn. Arya jerked her hand from her mother's grasp, darted sideways, and swung low. Needle's point slipped beneath the joint of the man's pauldron. A thin gasp escaped him, white steam against cold air. He toppled. Arya stepped back, eyes wide, sword shaking just once before stilling. Catelyn's muscles locked. She wanted to pull her daughter close, smother her in protective arms, erase the blade's deed. But the resolve in Arya's face halted her. Instead she bent, took the fallen man's dagger, and offered it hilt first. Arya accepted without words. Mother and child stood over the dying Frey until the man stilled, listening to battle ebb like a receding tide. When dust settled, 6 Freys lay dead, 3 dying. 1 archer fled, arrow feather protruding from thigh, but his screams told they'd chase him nowhere. Thoros wiped blood from his curved blade, anointing the ground with wine from his skin in rote blessing. Sandor crouched by a fallen horse, breathing hard. Girl sticks, am like a water dancer, he muttered toward Catelyn, perhaps meaning praise. Catelyn offered no reply. She advanced to each wounded Frey and stared until he met her eyes. Some recognized her Tully features even under Hood's shadow. Fear blossomed. She thought of the twins, of Robb, of the ribs heaving beneath her palm as life fled. She thought of balls of string Arya had once chased across Winterfell floors. Mercy? One croaked. Her voice rasped like dead leaves. For the young wolf, the trout, the wolf girl. She let the question rot between them and turned away. Sandor understood the rest. Steel whispered. The man's question ended in gurgle. They stripped the bodies of coin, salt beef, and a scroll bearing fresh orders. Intercept a rumored band escorting the wolf girl to Tully lands. The word spreads, Thoros said. We leave more corpses. The rumor will soon wear a Frey face. The ambush cost them time. Dusk closed fast. They pressed a mile farther to a hunter's hut abandoned since spring. Catelyn tended Arya's knuckles where hilt rub had raised blisters, wrapping them in clean cloth. Firelight chased shadows over the girl's face as she stared into the flames. Eventually her whisper found Catelyn's ear. I do not feel sick about it. Catelyn paused. The air between them smelled of wood smoke and damp wool. No, she answered. I imagine not. Arya's eyes lifted. Dark storm cloud eyes that once sparkled at markets, at wolf cubs, at strawberries floating in cream. Is that wrong? The question sliced deeper than any Frey blade. Catelyn drew her daughter's small hands into hers. When someone tries to steal your breath, you fight to keep it. She found truth there, ragged but whole. Perhaps there will be time to feel later. Perhaps not. Whatever comes, I will carry it with you. Arya leaned into her head against collarbone. It was not the clinging of a child seeking rescue, but the leaning of two warriors who share fatigue. Catelyn wrapped her arms around the girl and rocked until Arya's breathing steadied into sleep. Only then did Catelyn allow tears, silent, unshaped by sobs, to track down her cheeks, carving clean paths through grime. Before dawn they rode again, urgency sharpening every bootstrap. The terrain grew familiar. Gentle bends of the tumblestone, willows trailing leaves over mirrored surface, ruined grain mills where once barges ferried wheat to salt pans. River fog curled around fetlock and knee, blurring boundaries between water and earth. Finally, atop a rise crusted with broom, River Run burst into view. Crooked sigils of siege towers, catapults crouched like monstrous crabs, orange pennons of House Lannister interspersed with Frey gray. The castle's three walls still stood, islanded by the forked currents. Portcullis lowered, drawbridge severed. No banners flew from its main keep. Perhaps supplies dwindled, spirits waned. Yet the ramparts bristled with defenders in Tully crimson and blue. Catelyn's pulse beat against her unhealed throat. Old memories breathed from every stone. She and Lysa chasing each other along the battlements, while their father blue-colored glass into swan shapes. The courtyard where Ned first kissed her palm before riding north. The present overlaid these recollections with violence and hunger, but could not erase them. Thoros signaled halt among an outcrop of black pines overlooking the western bank. They dismounted, crouched. No crossing under daylight, he said. Scouts everywhere. We wait for full dark. Arya's gaze tracked the siege lines, clusters of tents, cook fires, bored sentries pacing berms. She pointed to a shallow bend, 20 bow shots downstream, where brush overhung the water. Currents run quiet there. 2 swimmers could cross with a rope, tie it to that half-sunken log, make a bridge of sorts. Catelyn squeezed her shoulder. I will go. Too many would know your face, Arya countered. The Freys want your head on a spike. Better I swim. I'm small. No. The words scraped rusty gates. If the Blackfish sees me, he'll believe. The men inside must open a cell port from within. Sandor hefted his sword. Girl swims with me. I'll reach the wall while your ladyship parades that stitched neck along their lines. Lim, Sep, Sandor. Enough. I'll not see her drown. He did not shout. Volume remained level, but finality hammered every syllable. Catelyn's fury flared. then faltered. In truth, river currents here could drag a child beneath unseen, and if Sandor crossed undiscovered, his scarred visage among Tully defenders might spawn confusion. She exhaled. Very well. But we carry out both plans. Arya and I attempt the stealth crossing. You stage a diversion at dawn with the Brotherhood. Fire 3 flaming arrows into the siege kitchen. When their guards rush to save supper, we scale the water gate. Dain? Thoros grunted approval. Sandor scowled but nodded. Preparations began. Lem stripped arrows, soaked cloth in pitch. Greenbeard scouted for deadfall logs. Catelyn and Arya shed heavier garments, wrapping steel in oiled leather to keep rust at bay. Catelyn trimmed the weight from her braid, slicing with a dagger until auburn strands coiled on moss. When she met Arya's eyes, she saw her daughter grasp the symbolism. No time for vanity, only survival. As day bled into twilight, clouds parted long enough for one bar of copper sunlight to strike River Run's main tower. The stone blazed, and in that instant, Catelyn felt the old gods of river and hill lean close. Listening, she wet her lips, unsure if prayer could still find her scarred voice, but tried. Protect the living. Guide my hand. Wind rustled leaves in answer. Night draped itself. From siege lines rose drunken laughter, dice clacking, the low drone of a camp follower's pipe. Catelyn and Arya slithered downslope, bellies brushing ferns, until they reached riverbank mud. Water glimmered, reflecting siege torches as fractured constellations. They tied a thin coil of line around their waists, one end to Arya's belt, the other to a stout branch that would serve as anchor. Catelyn whispered, "Stay close. Remember your strokes. River pulls, you pull harder." Arya nodded, eyes obsidian in starlight. Together, they slipped into river-cold silence. Frigid shock lanced Catelyn's limbs, but resolve sealed her lungs. They moved with measured strokes, bodies submerged to chins, current tugging like ghost fingers at ankles. Twice Catelyn felt eddies threaten to spin her. Twice Arya's hand brushed hers, steadying. Torch glow diminished behind them, reeds closed. Halfway across, a splash upstream sent panic skittering along nerves. Voices echoed faintly. A pair of Lannister sentries arguing about the price of leeches, by sound of it, but no alarm rose. They drifted beneath the drooping limb of the half-sunken log Arya had marked. Catelyn grasped bark slick with algae, hauled herself onto the trunk, gasping silent breath. She looped her half of the line around a jagged branch, cinching until rope twanged. Secure anchor established. Arya clambered beside her, water streaming from hair. They crouched, surveying the wall across 20 yards of marshy islet. There, half shrouded by cattails, crouched the water gate, an iron lattice half submerged, wide enough for one man. Inside, faint lantern light flickered. Catelyn signaled pause, 2 fingers held. They waited, counting heartbeats. Wind hushed. Somewhere an owl hooted, distant cousin to the signal used against the phrase. She wondered whether that meant ill omen or encouragement. Then she pressed Arya's shoulder and slid back into water, knife clenched between teeth. Arya followed. They reached the grate. River silt had welded many bars with weed and rust. Time conspired in their favor. One lower beam had bent away from its mount, enough for a lithe child to wriggle through. Arya tested it, submerged, and popped up on the far side, eyes shining. Catelyn exhaled relief. She searched along verticals until she found a hinge weakened by age. Steady pressure, a soft groan, iron surrender. She widened the gap just enough and forced herself through, scraping ribs. The cut along her throat stung as river grit ground into old scar tissue. Inside, tunnel walls wept cold droplets. Water lapped at waist. They crept forward, sound swallowed by echo. 50 paces brought them to a spiral stair where seep water trickled down steps, then to a locked wooden door. Through its plank seams leaked faint torchlight and the muffled tramp of boots. Catelyn pressed ear to wood. 2 voices, bored, discussing rations. She mouthed count of 3. Arya positioned herself opposite hinge, dagger poised. On 3, Catelyn shoved shoulder. The damp wood burst inward. First guard whirled, saw nothing but darkness before Arya's dagger punched under his chin. Second reached for horn. Catelyn slammed pommel of her knife across his brow. He sagged without time for alarm. They dragged bodies into corner shadow, barred the tunnel door, and ascended another narrower stair that ended behind a tapestry portraying House Tully's leaping trout. Catelyn's breath hitched. This hall once led to her father's solar. She parted the fabric, peered through slits. The corridor lay empty, sconces guttering. Beyond, a second archway opened to River Run's central yard. Through arrow loop windows she glimpsed siege fires, orange halos on dark field, silhouettes bustling to answer some distant uproar. The diversions had begun. Flaming arrows streaked skyward toward the cook's pavilion, smoke belched. Sentinels on battlements shouted, "Now!" Catelyn slipped from hiding, Arya glued to heel. They crossed the corridor, darted through archway, and melted into deeper shadow along the inner ward's base. Thunder of hooves echoed across drawbridge planks as defenders rushed to man outer towers. A burst of savage joy surged through Catelyn. Home. Stone beneath her palm felt like an old friend's hand clasp. But debarkation remained. She must find Blackfish or any ranking captain and unbar River Run's heart in one stroke. She recalled secret passageways used during her girlhood to reach Maester Vyman's rookery. With whispered directions, she guided Arya toward a postern at the base of the east tower. Praying disuse had not sealed it. They padded across mossy flagstones, skirting puddles of moonlight. Sudden footsteps clattered behind. A patrol? They ducked beneath a wooden walkway, just as two Lannister soldiers sprinted past, drawn to alarms beyond. Arya pressed tighter against wall until gold-red cloaks disappeared. Postern door appeared. A humble iron lattice half hidden by ivy. Padlock hung from staple, but rust had gnawed hinge to lace. Catelyn braced foot. Snapped wood. Door yawned inward, onto narrow steps. They climbed. The passage emerged at the second-story gallery overlooking River Run's great hall. The sight hammered breath from Catelyn's chest. Once this space rang with harp and laughter. Now trestles had been dragged aside for cots where wounded men groaned. Buckets of arrow fletching littered rushes. Atop the dais, beneath the carved trout where Hoster Tully once sat, stood Brynden Blackfish in tarnished mail, bellowing orders to runners. His beard had whitened, but his eyes remained river steel. Catelyn stepped into torchlight. "Uncle, Ted." Brynden pivoted, glaive half raised. Recognition slashed across his features. "Cat." His voice choked. He crossed the space in strides, disbelief giving way to embrace even as gloved fingers grazed the ragged scar at her throat. "The song said you were murdered." She shook head, swallowing pain. "There is no time. Arya is here. The Brotherhood without banners stage assault outside. Open the eastern water gate. Let them in before dawn." His gaze shot to the girl, recognition blooming. Joy warred with confusion. "Seven, save us. Arya Stark." He beckoned a sergeant. "Sound the harbor bell 3 times. Watergate protocol Ash Tandia." Within minutes, horns blared in coded sequence. Chains rattled. Portcullis gears groaned. Outside, in pre-dawn gray, rafts disguised as driftwood would slip across currents, bearing Thoros, Lem, Greenbeard, and Sanderdot. Catelyn pictured flaming arrows still dancing in siege camp, stew pots overturned, sentries shouting at imagined army. Brynden guided them to a side chamber, where lamps glow bathed shelves of dusty ledgers. He refused to release Catelyn's hand. "My girl, what has been done to you?" "Later," she rasped. "Is Edmure within?" "Taken to Casterly Rock as hostage months past. Castle would have fallen but for my stubbornness." A rueful grin. "Supplies run thin." His gaze softened. "But now, hope." Footsteps thundered outside. Thoros burst in, soaked, grinning beneath drenched red scarf. Behind him, Sandor loomed, water streaming from cloak. Brotherhood outlaws filed after, dripping onto stone. Brynden eyed the unconventional reinforcements. "Well, well. A court grown strange since last I saw it." Thoros saluted with wineskin. "Strange courts birth stranger miracles. Sir Brynden." The blackfish clapped hands. Miracles will suffice. We strike at dawn. The Freys relish breakfast. We'll steal it from their plates. Lady Catelyn, will you stand with us? She touched collar where scar met throat. I have stood since the twins. I will not sit now. Arya stepped forward, needle bright in fist. Nor will I. Her voice carried across the chamber. Clear bell, no tremor. Soldiers who overheard murmured approval. A stark cub among them stirred memories of oaths sworn beside trident waters. Plans unfurled through the long last hour of night. Brynden split the garrison. Archers to ramparts, northeast. Pikemen to east Salaport. The Brotherhood would harry siege towers from within, sowing panic. Catelyn and Arya remained at command posts to relay signals via fife and flag, tasks requiring sharp eyes over brute strength. Sandor accepted role leading a sortie against Frey tent lines to split their center. From doorway, Catelyn caught his eye. He touched the silver trout brooch at his chestplate, then turned away, meaning clear. Debt accepted, task embraced. When first light seeped through eastern haze, River Run's bells tolled in discordant fury. Portcullis jerked up. Tully spearmen poured forth, red and blue cloaks snapping as they slammed into half-awake Frey pickets. Panic tore Siga rose, tethered horses broke, trampling own masters. From parapets, Catelyn watched Sandor carve a path through milk fog. Greatsword rising, falling, always driving forward. Thoros sprinted behind him, flaming sword painting after images across morning gloom. Arya stood on a crate beside her mother, banner flags in hands dwarfed by shafts, signaling archer volley increments, just as Maester Vyman taught pages long ago. Though then, the flags had been silk fans used for dance. She barked times and ranges to runners who relayed upward. Each moment, she balanced on tiptoe. Hair whipping. Catelyn wanted to haul her down to safety, but another part thrilled at this partnership, forged in blood and lineage. Below, Ziga camp erupted in crimson and smoke. Tully defenders toppled one tower, its flaming frame collapsing onto supply wagons. Frey horn calls devolved into contradictory blats. Lannister officers tried to regroup, but archers on River Run's walls rained shafts upon officers' plumes until bright gilded helms disappeared. Yet, war is stubborn. By mid-morning, Frey reserves stiffened lines. Lannister crossbowmen advanced shields. Push crept toward riverbank once more. Brynden ordered final gambit. Open western sluice gates, flood trenches, cut besiegers from stable footing. He barked for Catelyn to sound call. She lifted bronze fife, but breath caught. Lungs stung from river chill. Arya saw the struggle, yanked the whistle, and blew. High, clear, unwavering. Dates dropped. Water thundered forth. Mud became syrup. Siga engines sank axle deep. Catelyn watched riders thrash as horses plunged chest high in churning ooze. Cheers rolled along battlements, swelling like thunder on distant shore. By noon, the Frey Lannister banner retreated beyond bow range, forming ragged crescent. Ziga broken, for now. River Run's battered defenders lined outer wall, shouting taunts. Catelyn sagged against parapet, tremors claiming limbs. She felt Arya's palm firm against her spine. Later, in solar scented with tallow smoke and crushed lavender, Brynden convened council. Maester Vyman tended wounded by lamplight. Maps unrolled across table still scarred by blade gouges. Victorious but outnumbered, River Run must choose next move, hold and starve, attempt breakout, or sue for truce. Catelyn's voice rasped over parchment. Surrender is death to every wolf and trout. We ride north, to the Neck, to White Harbor, to any house that remembers Winterfell's honor. Take the fight where Frey blades dull in swamp water. Brynden leaned on gauntleted fist. March 200 leagues, with half-starved men and wounded. It is march or bleed out here. Sandor's gravel cut in. He stood at chamber edge, still armored. Walls fall sooner or later. Thoros nodded. R'hllor sends fires to moving hearts, not stone coffins. Discussion churned until candles burned low. At last consensus coalesced. Within 3 days, River Run would abandon siege ruin. slip north by night along secret fisher trails. Small folk who wished to remain would be provisioned. Those who marched would join new host, sworn to Lady Stark and Lord Brynden. Ravens would fly to White Harbor, Bear Island, Deepwood Motte. Any banner still bound to wolves. When council ended, Catelyn found Arya seated at window seat gazing at moonlit river. She crossed, sat beside her. River breeze lifted loose strands of Arya's hair, brushing them across Catelyn's cheek like feather. "Will we ever stop running?" the girl asked. Catelyn considered. Through the casement drifted scent of wet stone and trampled grass. "Someday," she said, "when there is no one left to chase us. Or when we choose to make a stand that ends the chase." "Dannen?" Arya's fingers traced the windowsill's grooves, carved ages ago by some restless lordling's knife. "I'm not afraid," she whispered. "I know, but courage can grow weary. Promise me you'll rest when you need." The girl nodded, though eyes never left River's dark shimmer. "We should set them a list." "A list?" "Of names. Freys, Lannisters, traitors, mother and daughter both." She said it with calm certainty, as though reciting recipe. Catelyn's pulse fluttered, echo of the ledger she herself kept etched upon her heart. She inhaled. "A list, then. But not tonight." She drew Arya into embrace, letting silence fill the spaces words could not. Beyond, war's distant fires winked against horizon, but inside River Run's walls, for one fleeting span between battles, mother and child, shared a stillness neither steel nor song could sever. Dawn 2 days later found River Run's gates unbarred to the western dark. Columns filed silently across makeshift causeways, hooves muffled with rags. Catelyn rode near Van, Arya at her side, Sandor shadowing their flank. Brynden led scouts ahead, Lemon Greenbeard dispersed through ranks. Behind, towers faded into mist, soon to host Freys gnawing on victory already hollow. They marched north under cover of pre-dawn fog, following trout fishermen's secret paths along River's lesser forks. Every mile peeled away the siege's stench and layered new scents. Cedar, peat, distant bog. Catelyn felt weight shift within ribs, sorrow receding, purpose waxing. She was leading Arya toward the marrow of old northern vows, toward the promise of Winterfell's snow and stone. More storms lay ahead, yes, but somewhere beyond them waited a hearth where mother and daughter might yet lay aside swords and lists and whispers of dead men. For now hoofbeats drummed steady cadence. Fog opened like a curtain, revealing a stretch of marsh where reeds nodded under dawn breeze. 4 cranes took flight, wings beating in slow, synchronized arcs. Arya pointed, smile tugging at lips. Catelyn followed their ascent until the birds merged with cloud. War still hunted, but life's quiet marvels slipped through even the cruelest nets. Holding that truth, Catelyn urged her horse forward. The host followed, and the river beside them kept its secret song, carrying memories south, while they rode north to carve new ones. Memories tempered by loss yet lit by small fierce flames that not even death's cold could quench. H.A. Dew crept like silver dust across the sedge of the tumblestone as the long column pressed northward, each whisper of grass a brittle shard of dawn. The march began in near silence, save for the thudding breath of horses and the muted clink of riveted mail. Lannister outriders would scour the fields by midday. The hours before sunrise were an hourglass of hope turned upon its narrow neck, and every grain of time bled urgency. Yet within that hush, a quiet hum of faith threaded the ranks. One born of victory tasted, of castle walls reclaimed when all had seemed lost, and of the wild, improbable sight of a dead queen returned to lead them. Catelyn rode near the van, her cloak sewn hastily from the torn banners of fallen Freys. Its gray-blue folds draped her shoulders like the waters of the Trident itself, masking the constant pulse that throbbed beneath her scar. Arya rode so close their stirrup leathers brushed. Every so often the girl leaned forward to soothe her horse's ears, or murmur to Needle, the slim bit of steel nestled in its woolen sheath beside her thigh. Sandor Clegane paced just behind, helm swinging against his saddlebow, eyes forever roving for threat. 2 score Brotherhood archers ghosted along the column's flanks. hawk alert for glint of spear point or distant flash of crimson and gold. As the first true light crawled over the river, Brynden Blackfish signaled a halt at a half-collapsed granary whose roof sagged like a tired shoulder. Wheat once poured from its lofts to feed 5 prosperous villages. Now charred beams jutted skyward like ribs of a carcass. Still, its walls offered brief cover while scouts moved ahead. The men dismounted, stretching stiff legs. Catelyn swung down with care. Every bruise of the swim and the battle ached anew. Yet when Arya darted past to inspect the ruin, she felt a flare of warmth that overrode pain. Some part of her had feared that once the battle's fever cooled, mother and daughter would find themselves strangers again, bound only by blood and grief. But Arya paused in the doorway, turned back, and waved with a conspirator's grin. "Come see what I will find." Inside the granary, a shaft of sunlight pierced the broken roof, catching motes of dust in golden cascade. Mice scattered from burlap remnants, and the faintest perfume of spoiled grain rose, pungent yet oddly comforting, a reminder of seasons before war. Arya was prying at a barrel lid half buried beneath fallen timber. Catelyn joined her, bracing the plank while her daughter hauled. With a crack, the lid popped free, releasing a spill of hard, dry kernels that clattered across flagstones. Arya scooped a handful, bit down, and wrinkled her nose. "Almost stone," she muttered. "But stone's better than wind." She filled 2 small sacks. Catelyn steadied them while the girl tied off twine. Every crumb of forage counted for horses, now that fields lay blackened. When they emerged, Sandor had gathered kindling against the leeward wall and coaxed a reluctant flame. He ripped strips of jerky with teeth, and when Arya approached, he held out a piece without looking. Gesture practiced and strangely paternal. She accepted, chewed, then passed half to Catelyn. The 3 ate in companionable silence until a whistle rose from the far hedgerow. Greenbeard returning. The scout slid from brush like a fox, and relayed that the western track ahead remained clear. Yet dust spiraled miles behind. Enemy pursuit. Brynden ordered quick march, rotating fresh horses to rear guard. The column formed ranks once more, and the granary behind them faded into river mist. Mid-morning found them skirting the ruins of Fairmarket, that once bustling river town now reduced to a lattice of scorched beams and toppled chimneys. Catelyn's chest constricted at the memory of fairs where banners bearing trout and direwolf had fluttered side by side, where Ned had once bartered for crafted knives to gift the small folk of Winterfell. Now the market square lay strewn with broken carts and the husks of burned inns. A lone dog nosed at ashes, ribs stark under matted hide. Arya looked away but did not flinch. War had hammered empathy into steel rather than shattered it, Catelyn realized. A gift hard-won and perilous. At a crossroads beyond the town they met the first refugees. 3 farmers in mud-crusted cloaks dragging a handcart piled with limp bundles. The reek announced the corpses before sight did. Wife, daughter, son wrapped in linens too thin for burial shrouds. Brynden reined up, his voice, hardened by command, gentled to river pebble smoothness. The eldest farmer spoke of wolves, 2-legged, crimson-cloaked, who cut down the family at dawn. When Brynden offered escort north, the man shook his head. "I'd bury 'em here, sir, where they fell, so the stranger knows the debt's unpaid." Catelyn dismounted, pressed a silver stag into his cracked palm. It felt a paltry coin against the gulf of sorrow. But the man wept thanks. As the march moved on, Arya rode in stony silence for a league, then whispered, "There are too many names for one list." Catelyn brushed her knuckles against the girl's sleeve. "We will remember anyhow." By noon, clouds massed like charcoal anvils along the northern rim. A hot wind surged, swirling dust eddies down the road and lifting banners until cloth cracked like sails. Thoros rode forward, wineskin forgotten, his usual grin stripped away by the scent of ozone. "Storm's coming fierce," he warned, like the hand of Orlor closing. Brynden ordered the host toward a low escarpment where a limestone ridge could offer break from wind. They reached it as the first thunder rippled, stacking shields against the rock face and lashing horses to gnarled thorn trees whose roots clutched at crumbling stone. Rain broke with cannonade fury, sheets so dense the world shrank to arm's length. Catelyn and Arya huddled beneath a strip of oilcloth propped between shield and rock. Lightning splintered the dark, revealing the host kneeling against earth, each man and woman, an island beneath their improvised roofs. A memory flared. Gentle storms at River Run where she and Lysa splashed barefoot in courtyards, while cat's paws of water danced on stone. That world belonged to buried bones now. A second bolt shattered a lone pine atop the ridge, spraying firebrands down the slope. Men shouted, scrambling to stamp sparks. Amid the din, a new cry rose, shrill and panicked. Horses in terror. Catelyn dashed into the downpour to find a destrier rearing, eyes white. Its tether rope frayed under strain. If it broke free, the plunge down slick hill would break legs and men alike. She seized the lead, just as it snapped, thrown forward into flailing hooves. A huge figure interposed. Sandor, wrapping arms around the horse's neck, voiced a low growl that cut through thunder. He wrestled the destrier's head downward, until it blew froth and settled. Rain sluiced over the scar on his cheek, and for an instant, Catelyn thought of the horses that had once trampled the hound during the Blackwater. Perhaps storms unmoored those memories. He met her gaze, eyes hard but steady, and jerked his chin toward safer ground. Together they led the horse to a natural hollow where rock and bramble formed a windbreak. No. Arya appeared, soaked yet sure-footed, to tie a fresh knot that would hold. When the worst passed, clouds shredded into ragged banners, and the sun glowered through gaps like a bloodshot eye. Streams carved new channels across the road, and marching became a slog through ankle-deep suction. Yet storm had buried their tracks and cooled the dust. Pursuit would slow as well. Brynden took advantage, sending riders up a goat path known only to smugglers to test a shortcut toward the Green Fork's higher crossings. The main host followed at measured pace, slogging until twilight when the ridge cast a long violet shadow over valley floor. Camp that night rose in a ruined orchard where twisted apple trees, heavy with unpicked fruit, leaned over an abandoned shepherd's fold. Fires glowed behind low stone walls. The air smelled of wet bark and sour ferment from apples exploded by rain. Men filled bellies with makeshift stew of goat meat and grain scavenged from the granary barrels. Catelyn sat with Arya upon a fallen log, while Lem plucked a lute, fingers coaxing a mournful tune that once accompanied harvest dances. Faces softened in dusk. Even Sandor, squatting near flame's edge, seemed carved from something less rigid than iron. Near midnight, Greenbeard sought Catelyn and Brynden with urgent news. A village 2 leagues north flew the merman of Manderley alongside the direwolf. The first open northern banner sighted since River Run's fall. Scouts whispered that Sir Jorah Mormont and Sir Wendell Manderley led a vanguard south to seek remnants of Robb's host. If true, Brynden mused, beard twitching, we may find safe harbor in their camp. Catelyn's hope quickened, tempered by memory of broken vows and false alliances. Yet the lure of northern soldiers under northern command shone like frost sparkle in moonlight. They broke camp before dawn and reached the village, Alderbrook, under a pearl sky. Smoke rose from intact chimneys, rare luxury, and the defensive ditch bristled with sharpened stakes. A sentry's horn pierced quiet, and within moments armored men formed along the palisade, shields showing mottled turquoise merfolk. Brynden rode forward under truce banner, Catelyn and Arya beside him, Sandor looming a step back. Atop the gate ramp, a rotund knight with ruddy cheeks hailed them. Even at distance, Catelyn recognized Lord Wyman's middle son, Sir Wendell, thought slain at the twins. Tears pricked. Frey lies upon lies. By the Seven and the old gods, Lady Catelyn? Sir Wendell exclaimed, voice echoing across ditch. They swore you dead. Catelyn forced words past Scar. Not yet, good sir, and not today. Recognition rippled through garrison. Spears lowered, gates groaned open. Inside, Alderbrook pulsed with guarded bustle. Northmen in green-blue cloaks, honed dirks, wiped mail, and minted gossip in low clusters. At the village long hall, Manderley officers pored over river charts by candlelight. Sir Jorah Mormont, gaunt and hawk-shouldered since Catelyn last saw him at Winterfell years ago, met them at threshold. He bowed, then clasped Catelyn's forearm, his voice roughened by sea voyages. "My lady, the North believed every wolf lost." He knelt to Arya, child of Ned, girl becomes steel, and reverence flickered in weathered eyes. Arya brushed it off with a crooked smile, but stood straighter. In council, Mormont and Manderley detailed their plan. To push south along the King's Road in search of survivors, harry Lannister patrols, and rally any small folk still true to Stark. Word of Stannis Baratheon, holding the wall, had reached them via blackbirds. If Winterfell truly lay in the clutches of Ironmen no longer, the North could yet rise. Yet they lacked numbers, siege equipment, and, most of all, a living Stark to lead banners. Catelyn's arrival eclipsed every deficiency. Manderley pressed his meaty hands together, eyes shining. "With the Lady of Winterfell and her daughter at our head, we'll gather 10,000 lances before first snow." The North remembers. Catelyn met Bryndon's gaze, the blackfish wary as river pike. To pledge leadership meant stepping from shadows where resurrection cloaked her. Could she bear those eyes? Could Arya? Yet northern blood had ever valued deeds above whispers of necromancy. She rose, forcing shoulders square. "The North remembers," she echoed. "But memory alone won't break chains. We'll march for Moat Cailin, breach the neck, and light beacons from the high towers of Winterfell itself. Any who stand between us and home will answer for the Red Wedding." That night, a feast kindled in Alderbrook's hall. Simpler fare than lords once enjoyed. Smoked fish, oat bread, cider sharp enough to sting. Yet laughter found purchase as cups clinked, and Lem's lute twined with Greenbeard's pipe. Thoros wove flaming patterns through air, drawing cheers. Arya sat between Catelyn and Sir Wendell, peppering the fat night with questions about White Harbor's rumored bookshops and lemon cake vendors. He answered each with booming good humor, though his eyes reddened when he recounted Frey treachery at the Twins. Sandor stayed close to back wall, second mug untouched. But when a drunken pikeman stumbled near Arya, he shifted, subtle as storm cloud, and the man retreated. Near midnight, Catelyn slipped outside. Moon rode low and bloated, its pale coin mirrored in every puddle. She walked to the palisade where cool air stitched itself into tunic seams. The river murmured beyond reeds, promising a path both homeward and inescapably away from everything she once knew. Footfalls crunched gravel. She turned to find Jorah Mormont. His eyes sought hers with troubled purpose. "I have tidings carried by riders out of the neck. Theon Greyjoy's Ironborn hold only ruins of Winterfell. Bolton banners fly there now." The name struck like winter water. "Bolton," Catelyn whispered, feeling the old hate coil. "Roose murdered Robb by Freyside." Jorah nodded. "And this bastard is said to flay northern captives upon crossposts. They call him the Snow of Hell." Catelyn's hand closed around dagger, hilted belt. "Then we carve our path through flayed men and bastards." Her voice came sure as forged iron. The look that passed between them sealed unspoken contract of blood. The host tarried in Alderbrook 2 days. Time to shoe horses, mend harness, and gather the willing. Small folk trickled from hills, bringing pitchforks and deer bows, swelling numbers to near 2,000. Meanwhile, a raven from White Harbor arrived. Lord Wyman pledged ships to harass Lannister supply lines along western coast, and had already hanged 3 Frey envoys who dared seek trade. His letter ended with a single line: "For Ned, for Robb, for the North." Catelyn pressed wax seal to lips before tucking the scroll into bodice. On the third dawn, banners rose. The merman, the direwolf, the leaping trout beside Blackfish sigil, and for the first time since Robb's death, the ragged standard bearing Grey Wind's silhouette stitched anew by village seamstresses. The army rolled out in 4 wedges, scouts racing ahead like dragonflies. Arya rode at column's head, standard strapped to saddle peak, its fabric snapping in brisk wind. She wore boiled leather jerkins sized down from a Manderley squire, sleeves rolled to reveal bruises like storm shadow on young arms. Sandor kept pace just behind. Rumors spread that the Hound had turned Northman by oath of steel, though none dared ask. The march to the neck spanned 8 days through lowland fens, where cattails rattled dry heads and unseen things, splashed under peat dark waters. Rain returned intermittently. Mist clung morning and night. Twice they skirmished with Lannister scouts, swift clashes that ended in red mud. Arya fought at second. A golden cloak attempted to drag her from saddle, underestimating the wolf he gripped. Needle flashed. The man fell clutching a throat that pumped scarlet. Catelyn reached her daughter moments later, wanting to hold yet mindful of watching soldiers. Instead, she wiped blood from Arya's cheek with her own cloak. The girl's eyes remained intent, the way Ned's once did after battle. Pride and sorrow braided inside Catelyn, until she could scarcely breathe. Atop a windswept hummock on the sixth day, they spotted a lone tower jutting above fog. Its upper third collapsed. Maesters called it Harrowspire once, a way castle of the neck long abandoned. Now torchlight flickered atop its fractured crenellations, swamp folk sentries. Jorah hailed them in the lilting drawl of crannogmen, learned during exile hunts. Ropes were lowered, and lean figures in leather coracles guided the northerners through a maze of channels slick with lily pads. Upon Harrowspire's moss-slick stair, Catelyn met Howland Reed's daughter Mira, longbow slung across back, smile quick as kingfisher flight. She knelt, not to titles but to promises kept. My father sends word that the causeway gates of Moat Cailin lie in ruin, yet Bolton holds the towers with iron grip. We know secret ponds that breach its rear, but we need numbers your hosts can offer. Catelyn clasped Mira's forearm in fierce accord. Allies gathered like rain. Camp pitched among ferns that night bloomed into council. Reed's map, etched on bark with fish egg ink, showed submerged paths winding beneath Moat Cailin's crumbling western curtain wall. At low tide, knee-deep muck covered half the distance. At high tide, only men who could swim armored might cross. The plan that formed merged cunning of Crannog and steel of North. Reed's frog spearers would ferry small strike teams beneath moonless sky. Sandor, Brynden, and Lem would lead simultaneous assaults on 3 towers from within, while Manderley's infantry feigned frontal push across causeway at dawn. Once gates fell, the host would flood south, trapping Bolton garrison between hammer and anvil. 2 days later, moonless dark spread like ink. Fog hung thick enough to muffle crossbow twang. Catelyn stood with Arya on reed-clad knoll, watching dim silhouettes, Sandor among them, disappear into fenwater up to waists, then chests, moving silent as ghosts behind Mira's slack-pulled coracle. From towers, Bolton torches burned pale, vision hampered by marsh haze. Hours passed, each heartbeat a drum inside Catelyn's ears. She squeezed Arya's shoulder. The girl did not flinch but leaned lightly into the pressure. Sudden flare, a lantern arced from western tower and vanished. Silence followed, deeper than before. Moments later, second flare from central keep, then a muffled roar. Boom of collapsing door. Clash of steel. Across causeway, Manderley horns bellowed. Hundreds of throats echoed a war cry not heard since the young wolf's last charge. Winterfell, Winterfell! Torches surged, reflecting on shields as footmen advanced through mist. Bolton crossbows rattled, but flanked towers erupted into chaos. Sandor's force breached arrow loops. Brynden's men flung pitchpots. Flames licked interior rafters, silhouettes leaping. Catelyn saw the great gate stagger, hinges twisted from within, then crash outward with sound like a felled oak. Manderley axemen poured into courtyard. The battle became swirl of torch and shadow. Screams carried on fog-shrouded wind, until dawn's gray exposed carnage. Bolton corpses draped over battlements, a flayed man banner hauled down, trampled into mud. A horn blew recall. The fortress was theirs. At sunrise, Catelyn crossed the ruined causeway, Arya pacing beside amid cheering lines. Sandor peered at gate, blood spattered but grinning ragged teeth. In one fist he carried the severed head of a Bolton captain, pink face glaring forever. He tossed it into marshweeds, where it sank with a plop. Road to Winterfell open, he rasped. Catelyn clasped his forearm, an oath of comradeship that needed no words. Moat Cailin's courtyards reeked of blood and smoke, yet within those stones small arches framed views of the northern hills beyond. Purple-brown moors flecked with heather, and, far off, the first misty crowns of pine that guarded Winterfell's domain. A gull wheeled overhead. seabird carried inland by strange wind. Catelyn inhaled the scent of salt and peat, of all the shifting seasons that had sculpted her children's bones. She climbed the central tower's ruined stair until she stood above broken parapet, Arya at her side, the wind tugging their cloaks like impatient hounds. Behind, the united banners of river and sea and snow climbed poles. Direwolf, trout, merman, blackfish, crowned stag of Baratheon's distant hope, even Thoros rag of burning heart, raised in thanks to his red god. Below, soldiers cheered, a ragged chorus swelling into thunder. Catelyn lifted her voice as best the scar would allow. Words shredded but clear enough for those who strained to hear. Northmen, rivermen, brothers of banner and blood, the Red Wedding sought to end our line. Yet the wolf still walks. Winterfell awaits us, and justice walks at our heels. We march home, not as broken remnants, but as the sword that will cleave the night. Arya stepped forward, slender against ragged sunrise and unsheathed needle. Its point caught dawn, casting radiant line across mist. She spoke one word, home, and thousands roared it back, echo rolling across fens like thunder. Preparations began that hour. Bodies burned, wounds bound. Maesters sent ravens to White Harbor, Deepwood Motte, Bear Island. Messages went farther still. To Castle Black, to Stannis on the Wall, to any glimmer of alliance that might ignite new flame against the dark spread of Bolton and Frey dominion. That night, in a chamber whose walls still bore gouges from iron axes, Catelyn gathered Brynden, Jorah, Mira, Thoros, Sandor, and Sir Wendell. Candles flickered, pooling tallow. Maps unrolled, stones, marking routes. North to Torrhen Square, east to Barrowton, then Winterfell. Snow would soon thicken roads. But they would not wait for spring. Each man and woman pledged to ride until hooves cracked ice before Winterfell's gate. After council, Catelyn climbed alone to the parapet again. Stars glittered, cold and steady. Moon cast pale river of light across still marsh pools. She rested hands upon stone, letting its chill seep through scars and sinew, grounding her in this threshold moment between exile and homecoming. Footsteps approached. She did not turn. Arya settled beside her, placing their elbows so close they touched. Father once told me the stars are holes punched in the sky so the gods can watch, Arya whispered. Catelyn tilted her head, watched Orion's belt glimmer, 3 awful beauty marks upon Night's cheek. A comforting thought, she murmured. Do you think he's watching? I think, Catelyn said, voice barely more than breeze. He never stopped. They stayed until frost laced their cloaks. Dreams came for Catelyn that night. Dreams of Winterfell's towers caught in snowlight, of doors swinging wide while wolves howled welcome, of a hall filled with faces lost and found. Laughter rising like hearth smoke. A dream, yes, yet stitched with strands of possibility now stronger than silk. She woke before dawn, gathered cloak, and stepped into corridor where soldiers already roused. Outside, pale rose crept up eastern sky. Drumbeats rolled, hooves stamped, banners lifted. Catelyn mounted her horse, Arya astride a dapple gray whose name, she said, would be Mercy. Sandor settled at right flank, visor lowered. Brynden rode left, river cloak streaming. In the yard Thoros swung a thurible of incense, smoke curling like dawn's own breath. The gates of Moat Cailin, rust-scarred yet unbowed, hinged outward. Trumpet sounded. The road beyond stretched north, ribbon of frost-cracked earth flanked by sentinel pines. A hush fell just before the first hoof struck that road, as if the world itself inhaled in reverence. Then hooves thundered, banners snapped, and the host moved, living tide sweeping toward a home long denied. Catelyn felt the rhythm pulse up through saddle to spine, each beat a summons. She glanced at Arya, whose eyes gleamed not with vengeance alone but with fierce, stubborn hope. Mother and daughter shared a small nod, an agreement unvoiced yet absolute. Whatever storms awaited, Bolton cruelty, winter's jaws, the fickle swords of men, they would meet them together. Stoneheart and wolf blood, forged anew in fire and river, riding beneath the gaze of cold stars, and the silent blessing of the ones they had lost. And so they went. banners streaming, steel ringing, breath misting in crisp dawn. The North had birthed them. The North would answer. Behind, the marsh whispered secrets to reeds. Ahead, the horizon unfurled like a white-edged scroll upon which they would write the rest of their tale. Inked in hardship, signed in courage, sealed in the unbreakable bond of mother and child, reclaimed from death's abyss. Oh, ah! Wind sighed off the shivering sea and wound its way through the needle pines, carrying a salt-cold tang so pure it seemed to cut new lungs in all who breathed it. The host that had fled the frays now marched beneath the first snow dust of autumn proper, north of Moat Catelyn, and deep in lands once ruled by House Stark without question. Here, the very earth felt watchful. Pine trunks rose like cathedral columns, and the frozen mud between them preserved prints as crisply as a scribe seal in wax. Wolf, elk, hare, and now, thousands of men, horses, wagons. Each hoofbeat stirred white motes in the pale daylight, and the jangle of rivets rang clearer than temple bells in the thin, dry air. Catelyn rode in the van with Brynden on her left, Sandor hulking to starboard, and Arya a half-horse length ahead, standard-bearer still, the direwolf rippling above her shoulders, in a gale that smelled of snow and distant fires. Days of relentless pace had thinned the column into hard sinew. The weak had slipped to wagon benches, the weaker to infirmaries fashioned from sledges, but none had turned back. Every soul understood the North gave mercy scarcely and held grudges forever. If they lagged, northern night would swallow them as surely as a wolf pack. The road, if the frozen rut could still claim the word, angled northeast, skirting the flint cliffs, then curved west toward Barrowton, last market before the long tundra of the Winterfell grasslands. There, Lord Danella Locke had promised grain stores and fresh horses, though ravens also warned of Bolton scouts massing like smoke on the horizon. For 7 days no banners save loyal green and gray had marred the skyline. That, Brynden muttered, meant Roose Bolton was gathering force for a single crushing hammer stroke, rather than frittering men on skirmishes he might lose. Catelyn answered with silence. Every strategy the Leech Lord hatched she intended to spoil. Just after midday, with clouds roiling low and dark as furnace smoke, the first sign of that hammer appeared. Reed's Crannock scouts slithered through the pine needle drifts and reported riders 6 leagues west, 200 or more. Flayed man pennon snapping bloody against the wind, moving to intercept at a shallow ford of the winter's run. Brynden called immediate council in the lee of a half-crumbled watchtower. Manderley, Wendell, Mira Reed, Jorah Mormont, Sandor, and Thoros crowded around a frost-stained map spread across a blackened table plank. Snowflakes settled on the parchment like silent snares. By unspoken accord, Arya stayed, shoulders square as any veteran, while Catelyn listened to the pulse thrumming in her scar. Bolton means to bottle us between river ice and his van, Brynden rasped, glove-tip stabbing map thought out. We break west, push through fast, gain Barrowton's palisade before dusk. Too slow, Mira countered. Braids crusted with frost. Flayed men ride northern garrons. Sure-footed on ice. We'll meet them upon the run, like it or not. Sandor spat, the gobbet hissing where it struck snow. Then we feed them steel. Clegane will take vanguard. These pine rabbits can follow. Thoros chuckled, breath fogging. Lore loves bold hounds. Yet dawn's not far. Lightbringer glows brightest in night assault. Let them huddle in their camp till dark. We slip round torch tents. No. Catelyn's ruined voice cut, thin yet immovable as a sword edge. Eyes swung to her. She touched the map where the winter's run bent like a crooked elbow. Here stands an alder copse on high bank. South shore slopes gentle to ford. North drops sheer. We lure Bolton across, snap shut from flanks, drive them into the river. Ice takes more than any blade. Silence wait a breath. Then Jorah's calloused thumb traced a line. A half-moon pincer, but need a lure. Arya answered, I'll ride point. Catelyn's pulse twisted. All gazes snapped to the girl, 15 winters hardly. Yet none dared scoff. Needle had spoken thrice in past skirmishes, and every strike true. Catelyn read resolve in Arya's eyes. The same iron Ned wore when he'd ride out first from Winterfell Gate, so small folk saw their lord feared no road. She opened mouth to forbid, then closed it. The army followed direwolf banners, because living Stark blood rode beneath them. To hide her daughter behind mailed walls would drain that magic faster than any mace. Instead, she said, "You ride with me. We'll draw them together." Sandor cursed beneath breath but nodded. Plan set. Brynden dispatched runners. The host fanned into snow-laden woods by companies of 60, each led by a reed guide to mask positions. By mid-afternoon, all was motionless but the hiss of wind through pine. Catelyn and Arya took only 8 outriders, light horse clad in dust-gray cloaks, and cantered onto the open road, banners lowered to half-staff as if weary from travel. Frost crackled under hooves. In the far distance, 12 crimson dots wavered, a Bolton vanguard, cantering to intercept. They let themselves be seen, then turned gradual wheel toward the ford. Bolton riders gained ground, hooting Tantatoring. Catelyn's fingers whitened around reins. Scar tissue tugged with each breath. Yet she kept seat steady, body remembering hundreds of leagues beside Ned long ago. Arya's mount threw its head eager. The girl leaned low and whispered calm. At the alder copse, Catelyn slowed, feigning concern at break in road. A horn, a shrill sinew string sound, ripped the hush. Bolton commander signaling charge. 60 riders thundered downhill. Snow streaming from fetlocks. Flayed man sigils aflutter like skin strips in butcher's wind. Catelyn wheeled, cloak snapping, and bolted toward ford. Arya matched instantly. River ice shimmered ahead, half melted beneath sluggish current. They splashed into shallows, forcing mounts through black water chilled to bone. Faces of Bolton men grew clear. Leather masks sewn with mouthless grins, male leashed with pink flesh trophies. Hatred flared in Catelyn hot enough to evaporate cold. They reached North Bank, turned sharp between twin alder trunks, and the trap closed. From the ridge left came Mira's Crannog bowmen. Right, Brynden's spears bursting from snow. Arrows sleeted. Long pikes bristled down slope like a boar's hedge, driving panicked horses back. Water churned red, ice plates snapping under iron-shod hooves. Bolton riders at front tried to wheel, but ranks behind pressed them on. Catelyn and Arya circled behind Brynden's line, then swung back to face river, adding their voices to rally cry, "Winter wool!" The slaughter lasted minutes, though memory would count it hours. Some Boltons leapt from saddle and attempted swim upstream. Manderly crossbows feathered them mid-stroke. Others dismounted to fight on cracking ice. Sandor plowed through, greatsword carving space like a scythe through barley. The river consumed at least half, a grinding sluice beneath flow. When horns on distant ridge signaled Bolton rear approaching, Brynden withdrew orderly. Prisoners roped, wounded lifted to sledges. They vanished into pines by secret track, leaving river to swallow dead. Night fell, and snow returned heavier, muffling the world save for labored breathing of horses and groans of injured. They camped in hollows behind limestone rise. Fires banked low beneath Grinwood to hide smoke. Catelyn saw to prisoners, 10 men, 1 captain, wrists lashed. She demanded names. They spat curses. Sandor offered to pry answers with edge. Thoros preferred flame. But Catelyn shook head. Let them remember, mercy, Stark women show. The men were fed thin broth, wounds bound. Terror shone fiercer than hate in their eyes. Later she sought Arya. Found her beneath a spruce bough sharpening needle by starlight. Snow dusted the girl's hair silver. Catelyn crouched, joints aching, an opened hand. Inside lay a ring. Ned's ironwood knot, recovered from Maester Lewin's effects via Raven parcel from White Harbor. She pressed it into Arya's palm. Your father's. He would want the bearer of his blade to keep it. Arya turned it over, rough circle dark as Raven's wing. For once words failed her. She only slid ring onto forefinger, where it hung loose. She smiled. Small and fierce. Catelyn folded arms around daughter, and for heartbeat neither were warriors. only kin warmed by closeness and pine-scented dark. Snow piled through night, heavy enough to muffle horns when Bolton main force found the river massacre at dawn. Runners reported confusion, search parties striking blind paths. Brynden elected swift march southwest round Barrowton to skirt enemy muster entirely, avoid siege. Keep momentum, strike Winterfell before Roose could consolidate. The host packed at gray first light, leaving phantoms in powder where tents had been. Barrowton's outskirts showed harvest stubble under ice crust. Lord Locke awaited beside Windtilt signpost, 50 mounted archers at back. She bowed deep to Lady Catelyn and Arya both, eyes kindled with vengeful ardor. Grain wagons rolled up behind her, 100 sacks rye, oats, dried carrot. They would march with the host, a moving stomach. The combined force, now 4,000 swords, 2,000 green levy, and near 1,000 spears of Crannog and Locke archers, turned north toward the King's Road. Snow ceased midday, but clouds remained steel, promising deeper cold. Scouts claimed Winterfell's fields already frost-white, even at noon. A hard autumn foreshadowing brutal winter. The sooner they struck, the less famine would carve them. 2 evenings later, as campfires flickered among snow-bent birches, a horn shepherded to council tent, a ragged rider draped in black, a crow of the night's watch. Frost runned his beard, his raven perched gaunt shoulder. He knelt to Catelyn, delivering scrolls sealed with wax of castle black. News spilled. Stannis Baratheon held the wall still, but his strength dwindled. Wildlings had broken again under a new leader sworn to the old gods. A woman wearing weirwood mask, said to speak with ghostly children beneath snow. More. Jon Snow, Lord Commander, had vanished into haunted forest with handful of rangers weeks prior. Fate unknown. Catelyn read the lines twice, torn between maternal worry. Jon had been her ward, if never quite her son, and the ruthless calculus of war. Should the wall fall, Bolton treason would pale beside tide of ice wraith legends. She paid the messenger in salt beef, furs, and a hearty gelding, dispatching him back with token. A lock of auburn hair and message to Jon. Your sisters ride to claim home. Hold the north until we stand beside you. That night she dreamt of 5 dairy wolves racing across moonlit snow. Grey Wind, Ghost, Nymeria, Shaggy Dog, Summer. Grey Wind and Summer bled from belly slashes, yet ran tireless, hot breath turning red where it hit air. Ghost led, eyes like carved moonstones. Behind, Nymeria's muzzle dripped ice shards. Shaggy Dog loped 3-legged, yet growled thunder. They converged at a hill crowned by dark keep and circled until stone shivered. She woke before dawn, gasping. Heart a hammer. She took it as omen of stark spirits gathering. 5 days of forced marches brought the host to the Wolfswood's ragged lip. Winterfell lay 30 miles east, across rolling heath and the wide ribbon of the White Knife. Scouts relayed Bolton defenses. 600 spears under Ramsay Snow, plus Sellsword company of 200 Wayfarer axes. Walls partially repaired, yet gatehouse still charred from Ironborn siege. The bastard of Bolton kept captured northern lords chained to kennels and flayed a new prisoner each dusk. Smoke from his cookfires visible leagues away. Fury rippled through camp as tale carried. Men demanded assault at once. Women sharpened scythes for flank. Brynden stoked passion, then tempered it. We'll strike, aye, but with cunning, not waste. They hashed plan until candle stubs guttered. At dusk, Catelyn walked perimeter. Wolves howled from deep wood. Hunting packs stirred by scent of many men. She paused, inhaled pine, felt earth hum under snow. Footfalls light. Mira Reed emerged, eyes reflecting starlight. Scouts found sign of giant pack, she whispered. 50, maybe more. Led by one she-wolf near horse size. Catelyn's pulse stuttered. She glimpsed Nymeria's legend grown monstrous. Arya, told, felt no fear, only quiet wonder. She heard me, the girl said, as if discussing a sister. Hour before dawn the assault unfurled. Manderley infantry would array along South Ridge, faint frontal attack at first light. Clegane, Thoros and Locke archers would slip through Wolfswood west, take the Lychyard Gate. Reed's frog spearers would swim the stream beneath collapsed northeast wall and raise ladders for Crannog bowmen. Brynden led cavalry reserves sweeping in after breach. Catelyn and Arya rode with him. Stark banners to rally victory, or die seen. Snow thickened as they moved. Sky yet black, but sheen in east hinted pre-dawn. Catelyn fingered Ned's broken fletch arrowhead strung on cord at throat, last relic from his first hunt. She breathed once, steady. Manderly trumpets blared, drums thumped, torches flared along ridge. Ramsay's lookouts shrieked alarm. Arrows hissed downward, shield walls raised, catapults chucked pots of pitch. Yet, South Ridge was ruse. Manderly men withdrew after shower, luring Boltons to that wall walk. West Sandor and Lock archers sprinted low through snowdrifts to Lishard Palisade, shadowed by weeping willows. Sandor hewed log bars with axe strokes so fierce wood exploded. Gates splintered. He and 30 men surged into Kennel Yard, where chained hounds snarled. Ramsay's hunters rushed to loose beasts, but archers dropped them. Sandor kicked open cages. Starved curs lunged at first figure they saw. Bolton Keeper, ripping. At Northeast Stream, Mira guided Crannog men underwater through reeds. Ice stung, but they emerged beneath wall gap, drove iron pitons, and hauled rope ladders. Bowmen swarmed, picking defenders on parapet with gray-fletched shafts. In minutes, two sides faltered. Brynden saw breach flare. He spurred cavalry. Catelyn's mount pounded across frosted heath, Arya beside, banner streaming. Dawn broke as they reached gate, light catching castle like forged spark on anvil. Smoke from Ramsay's hearth twisted overhead. Inside yard, chaos reigned. Bolton shields fracturing. Wayfarers sellswards dropping coin purses, some switching sides with convenient oaths. Ramsay himself appeared atop main stair, clad in leather stitched with human skin. Bolts sewn to arms. He dragged a gaunt prisoner, old woman, by a hair and placed blade to her throat, roaring, "Back, or the sow bleeds." Spears hesitated. Catelyn squinted. Prisoner bore gray streak through auburn hair. Mage Mormont, captured months ago. Catelyn nudged horse forward. Her voice, ragged yet carrying, rang. "Let her go, bastard of bastard." Ramsay's eyes narrowed, shark pale. "Mother of corpses," he hissed. "I'll send you her skin as cloak." He began cut. Arrow whistled. Arya on stair landing, bow stolen off fallen man, string quivering. Shaft took Ramsay in wrist. Knife clattered. Mage head butted him, then bit ear. Sandor barreled up, sword low. Ramsay yanked second blade free. Slashed. Sandor blocked, swiped. Severed fingers. Bastard screamed, tried retreat. But Labradors loosed earlier bounded, smelling gore. They hamstrung him. Sandor's sword flashed again, head rolled. Silence broke like glass. Then cheers erupted. Gates flung wide for Brynden's riders. Thoros lifted flaming sword, traced spiral in air. Spears slammed hafts on stone. Catelyn dismounted by Arya, seized daughter's shoulders. Tears cut hot paths across cheeks chilled by wind. After battle, captives freed, Wool, Serwyn, Glovermen, knelt before Catelyn and Arya. Lord Wool, giant as pine trunk, raised fist. "Lady Stoneheart no more, Lady Winterfell." Roar answered, echoing halls Ned once strode. Within hour, Bolton banners burned in courtyard brazier. Ash drifted onto snow like gray petals. In crypt below First Keep, Catelyn and Arya descended stone steps lit by torches. Dust motes danced. Statues of old Stark kings lined passage, direwolves at feet. They stood before Ned's new carved likeness. Catelyn laid trembling palm on cold stone. "We are home, my lord." Arya placed ironwood ring upon statue's finger. Silence deep, solemn, yet not empty. Wind through cracks made low note like distant lute string. Above, council convened in great hall, repairing roof to hold heat. Lords pledged fealty anew. Raven penned to Stannis and to Wall. Winterfell secured. North must unite. Yura given command to ride west, subdue iron-born stragglers. Manderly sailed White Knife to Harry Lannister grain fleets. Mira led Krenog home, with promise of mutual watch. Night that followed, feast Spartan but jubilant. Turnip stew, bare ribs, sour beer. Bards played, children of freed smallfolk laughed. Catelyn sat high seat, Arya at her right. She wore no crown, only simple direwolf brooch hammered from melted Bolton chains. When toasts were raised, she drank lightly, voice still rough, but clear. "We are wolves," she said, "and wolves run better in pack. Tomorrow we bury our dead, mend our walls, and look to the dawn. But tonight, remember those who ran before us, Robb, Sansa lost south, Bran and Rickon spirits of wood, Jon beyond ice. Their howls guide ours. Eat, drink, and know Winterfell stands. They know." Snow fell outside, quiet velvet. In Godswood, the heart tree's red leaves caught flakes like rubies set in white gold. Catelyn walked there after feast, alone but not. She knelt beneath weirwood face, touched cheek scar to cold bark. Let memory flow, river water, wedding blood, daughter's arms, wolves' dreams. She rose lighter. At rampart she found Sandor, visor lifted to sky, fresh pink scar where ear gone. He grunted greeting. She offered thanks again. He shrugged, staring north where Aurora danced faint green. "Just killing monsters," he said, "till none left and I'm last." She answered, "Then we'll find you smaller ones to tame." Something like a laugh rasped his throat. Weeks passed. Winterfell breathed anew. Forges hammered, kitchens steamed, ravens came and went. Council named Arya Lady Protector, until siblings confirmed. She took charge of training yard, teaching orphans water dancing footwork. Catelyn studied ledgers, rebuilt alliances, invited White Harbor healers to tend injured. One Red Sunset Eve scouts returned with tall youth cloaked in black and white fur. Jon Snow, leaner, eyes storm-shadowed yet alive. He crossed yards slow, disbelief etched until Catelyn stepped forth. For heartbeat both froze within years of history. Then she bowed head. He knelt, words unnecessary. Arya broke tension with shriek, tackling him. Reunions spilled warmth through courtyards colder than tombs weeks before. And so Winterfell's halls filled. Wyman's envoy with casks of honey mead and news of Frey heads floating in Manderly moat. Asha Greyjoy, under flag of truce, seeking peace. Tormund Giantsbane bringing tamed mammoths and pact of blood against night's foe. 19 times sun rose dim behind snow clouds, and each dawn Catelyn climbed battlements to watch Smith's rivet gatehouse beams, to hear children laugh at wolves' pups cavorting in kennel yard, to feel heart pulse still. Yet she never forgot Riverlands or Price of Mercy. On 20th dawn she dispatched small retinue south. Thoros, Sandor, Mira, to seek Sansa, still whispered captive somewhere near Vale, and to carry her message along every road. The North has its mother again, and the daughter who walks with shadows. Let friend come warm by our hearth. Let foe shiver. Night after their departure, she dreamed once more of 5 direwolves, now running inside Winterfell walls, lifting muzzles to call moon down. Their howls merged into single chorus so piercing even dream Catelyn wept. She woke in cold dawn, but tears were joy. Music of home alive. She rose, draped cloak over shoulders, and descended to hall where Arya sparred with Jon, laughter echoing. She breathed deep, scent of wood smoke and boiled oats mingling. And finally, after river death, after stone hearts, after endless snow-stung miles, felt warm. Outside, banners stiffened in cold wind. Direwolf, trout, merman, bear, reed, flayed man, stripped to bones and repainted with pale sunburst of northern dawn. Far off, horns at watchtowers sounded. Riders approached with wagons of seed grain from Barraton, and thrush hens for spring. Life returning. Catelyn Stark stood upon the dais, as blacksmiths raised new portcullis grated with paired sigils. Wolf and trout, entwined. She laid hand to winch lever, felt weight and pulled. Iron teeth rattled upward, gates yawning wide to road that stretched south and east and west into broken world. Snow blew in, swirling about her boots, but the steps within were warm, and behind her the hearth blazed. She turned, lifted cloak hem, and strode inside, Arya matching stride, Jon flanking other side. In their wake, Winterfell's rebuilding murmured like distant surf, steady and unending. Outside, wolves howled once, twice, thrice. The sound carried across frosted fields toward horizons where, sooner or later, all debts would be paid and all songs sung beneath a sky of dancing lights. Eaji, Elmshani. Snow whispered secrets across Winterfell's fresh-laid ramparts, while a wan, shimmering dawn seeped over the wall tops like spilled milk. The keep's new portcullis, wolf and trout fused in cold iron, had not yet taken on rust. It gleamed pale in the thin light. The teeth of the gate stained crimson, only near the joints where a blacksmith's careless thumb had bled during final riveting. Smoke drifted from every roof, blue snakes that vanished into the still winter air. Beneath the eaves, icicles lengthened like daggers, and somewhere in the stone belly of the castle, a great hammer rang in slow rhythm, shaping yet another link for the new chain bridge above the moat. Reconstruction was a drum that beat without ceasing, and Winterfell itself breathed to that pulse, walls flexing and settling like ribs after a long fever. In the courtyard, Jon sparred with two of Lord Wool's sons, his movements slow and deliberate, teaching rather than dominating. When the younger boy's wild swing came too high, Jon guided the wooden blade clear of his shoulder, pivoted, and tapped the lad's ribs with a gentle smack. The boy flushed crimson, muttered apology. Jon ruffled his mop of hair, brown touched with the russet of mountain autumn, and bade him keep his feet square, shoulders loose. The older wool boy grinned, absorbing every correction. Around them, other warriors trained. New forged recruits from Barrowton pairing with Manderley veterans, Lock archers practicing on straw men from dwarf tree stands, the Crannogmen rehearsing silent spear thrusts in icy puddles. The yard rang with shouted commands, the scuff of boots on frost, and the gasping breaths of men and women determined never again to be caught unready by southern treachery. Catelyn watched from the mead hall's open doorway, the carved dire wolves on the lintel catching dawn's glow above her. She leaned on the door's iron catch, its chill biting through glove leather into the thin white scar now puckering across her palm, another tally in a ledger of hurts she no longer feared to confront. Her heart thrummed with mingled awe and unease at the new Winterfell rising around her. Familiar stones, yet with seams fresh and shining, familiar faces, yet bearing new resolve behind the eyes. It reminded her of her reflection on ice, same shape, shifted in subtle ways by the cold glass beneath. Behind her, the hall's hearth boomed, oak logs spitting resin in fragrant pops. Steam rose from the porridge cauldron, and the high seat sat unoccupied, save for Grey Wind's banner draped over its back. She had not claimed that throne as queen, nor would she. She would keep it warm for those still missing, those still in the world's wild edges. She could already imagine Sansa's gentle posture there, diplomacy glinting beneath courtesy, Bran's thoughtful gaze cataloging repairs, Rickon's tangled curls bouncing as he fidgeted, bored by counsel. She told herself those chairs must remain empty until the rightful heirs returned. Better emptiness than stolen warmth. She stepped onto the courtyard-packed earth just as Jon dismissed the younger wool boy. He caught her eye and nodded, grateful for the audience, and she inclined her chin in silent answer. Their reconciliation was fragile, but real. An unspoken pact that blood, no matter its origins, was thicker than the oceans of grief between them. They did not speak of the night she'd apologized, scarcely above a whisper, nor the tears that had slipped from Jon's eyes when she told him he belonged here. His father's son after all. She made her way across the yard. Blacksmith sparks floated behind her like fireflies, and the crisp crunch of snow under her boots echoed off flint-quarried walls. She headed for the ruined Sept Tower, once the warmest corner of the keep, now stripped to a skeletal nave of stone ribs and broken stained glass. There, in the vaulted half-dome, Davos Seaworth waited with parchment and maps. A sailor far from his salt water, Yet his loyalty had proven truer than half the northern lords who once feasted here. Inside, a long trestle table stood beneath a drafty hole in the roof. On it, Davos had arrayed tiles of ivory, each incised with a sigil. The fiery heart of Stannis, the flayed man of former Bolton rule, a black stag on white for the free folk who followed Jon, and half a dozen simpler marks for smaller houses, the Badgers, the Knot, the Nori. In the center, a great wooden slab marked with chalk lines detailed every league between the wall, Winterfell, and White Harbor. Beside it sat Maester Julius, a gray-bearded man lent from White Harbor, and Asha Greyjoy, arms folded tight under sealskin cloak, her expression a wary mixture of respect and impatience. At Catelyn's entrance, Davos stood. He bowed like a sell-sail paying dues to Portmaster. Politeness came to the smuggler as naturally as cunning. "My lady, good morning. The ravens arrived." He tapped a scroll. From Bear Island. Lady Lyanna writes that she harbored no love for Ramsay Snow, but refuses to bend knee to ghosts or burned champions. She invites us to prove ourselves by sending a handful of our best to help cull an outbreak of giant spores burning through her winter crops. Davos let irony color his smile, and adds, "We will judge you by the pelts you return with." The North remembers, but so does the bear. "Nan." Catelyn took the letter, scanning the neat, daunting script of Lyanna Mormont. She almost smiled. Such bluntness stirred fond nostalgia for young Arya's sharper jibes. Folding the parchment, she tucked it against her belt. "She offers us a test then. We'll honor it." The bear seldom roars lightly, but once satisfied, she roars loud enough that the whole North hears. Asha quirked a brow. "Giant spores," she repeated, dry amusement touching her voice. "We Greyjoys raid every horde from Arbor Wine to Valyrian Steel, and none of our maesters have recorded beasts so large. Could be a trick, Bear Island imagination fueled by meat." Maester Julius shook his head. "The creatures are not myth. Giant Ocorus, the old texts call them, 10 feet snout to hind. They seldom appear south of the knotted pine valleys, but harsh winters drive them down the ridges. Their hide will turn any arrow." He tapped Catelyn's map. "But claws will rend crofters' grain stores just as quick." Catelyn traced a gloved finger along the inked route to Bear Island. 19 leagues by boat from Deepwood Motte, across seas that could freeze by first snow. "We send a party before the straits close," she said. "We are not simply pelts, but faith. We don't need alliances of fear." She looked to Davos, then to Asha. "Would your axe be free to sail east? The Iron Isles once raided Bear Island's villages. Your presence may startle as much as reassure, but your victories will speak." Asha's lips curved. "I sail where the wind cuts deepest. A Mormont chieftainess might relish drinking from my skull, but we share foes worse than old grudges. I'll command a longship. Black tide still rides light at the Wolf's Den." She jerked thumb at Davos. "The Onion Knight fancies oysters over iron. He can steer us past the ice flows." Davos chuckled. "I know the channels, though I'm more salt than frost." He bowed again to Catelyn. "I'll depart at dawn's tide. We'll tan the boar hides and line your banners with them." Maester Julius offered a cough. "I'll prepare ravens to Bear Island, warn of your approach. Surprises cause panic. Panic costs lives." While they spoke, the shivering wind raced up the nave and rattled loose shards of colored glass overhead. Catelyn's gaze lifted to the absent rose window, once a rainbow wheel that caught morning sun. Arya had stood beneath that window as a girl, sword made of broom twig. Now she wielded steel and bore scars invisible as the night's frost. "More ravens," Julius continued. "One from Lord Robert Arryn's council. Lady Sansa is still alive, though sequestered at the Eyrie under the restless eye of Sir Nestor Royce. Unverified, but the Whispering Ravens network insists a Littlefinger no longer controls the Vale. That power vacuum could swallow her, or free her." The news struck Catelyn's chest like a mace. Relief warred with fear. A living hostage, perhaps, but a living daughter. That was enough to ignite a 1,000-mile march. Asha whistled low. You Starks multiply like Kraken's spawn. One pops up in every tide. Catelyn's jaw tightened. We hold a plan already set. Sandor, Thoros, and Mira ride east across the mountains of the moon to reach Sansa. With Royce unshackled, they may parley with true Vale lords. Nunn. Davos folded the map, tucking tiles inside chest pocket. Let us hope they travel faster than letters. The road to Gulltown crawls with Sellsword's fat on Littlefinger's last coin. Outside, a horn sang from the towers. 3 short blasts, one drawn, signaling a rider arriving under banner of peace. Catelyn stepped to the doorway, scanning the white-flecked bailey. The gates creaked, and 2 outriders led a roan pony draped in dusty cloak. The rider bent low, half slid from saddle as a page ran to steady him. The cloak fell. Old gray beard threaded with black, a weather-beaten face scarred by frostbite. The man's eyes, an uncanny blue, settled upon Catelyn and flickered with hesitant recognition. She recognized him then. Tormund Giantsbane's second son, Torreg, once a laughing youth she'd glimpsed beyond the wall during King Robert's hunt for white-cloaked creatures. A hush fell over the yard. Torreg straightened, cradling the bundle bound in sealskin and tied to his back. A child swaddled so thoroughly no limb showed. Steam puffed from its breath. Torreg's voice cracked, raw from travel. I carry snow and bones and pleas from the wall. Jon left his sparring ring, stride urgent. He reached Torreg, hand on the child's bundle. Is that Val's babe? Torreg rasped. The wall is half-starved. Stannis clings to towers of rotting timber. The dead walk again, my lord, and giants flee from them. Mance Rayder's final fire dwindles. Catelyn's blood chilled, even as she turned pragmatic. Bring him to warmth, to the maester. Jon, see it done. She shifted to the great hall, voice rising. Someone fetch Glover, Wool, Manderley at once. And Davos. We must answer this cry. Nemtarind. Within the hour the council gathered at the high table, its surface still scarred by Bolton daggers, not yet planed smooth. The child, his skin pallid blue with cold, lay before the hearth, Maester Julius feeding thin broth by dropper, while Torreg shivered beneath a bare fur mantle. He spoke between chattering teeth. A shadow of cold moves south. The Night's Watch counts fewer than 400 men. Stannis bars the port of Eastwatch, but ships flee at every rumor. Queen Celais prays to her fires, but they warm only themselves. We heard horns. 1, then 3. The old stories say 3 horns for the others. We saw their eyes glint in dark, and we ran. Even giants. They come in silence, with dead men's faces stretched wrong. No. Vull slammed fist to table. Then we ride north, cut the rot from root. Glover nodded, iron gray beard trembling. We have 4,000 spears. The wall will hold a season with that. You won. Manderley's nephew Wex shook head. 3,000 spears if we march all, my lord. Winterfell's walls still need defenders. Jon stepped forward, voice calm, authority radiating. Tachi. We send half north, half remain. The wall is leagues away, and the dead tire not. Eyes turned to Catelyn. She felt weight like ancient chains pull her shoulders. She remembered Robb's counsel, the eagerness to protect the South, and how each decision had cost him piece by piece, until the hall at the Twins bathed in red. She swallowed, tasting iron and ash. When she spoke, her throat ached, yet words rang sure. Yes, we answer, but we answer wisely. My uncle holds River Run, rebuilt stronger than ashes. He will march soon with Riverlords fresh loyal. Deepwood, Mott rises. White harbors, fleets close seas against Lannister grain. The North is not alone. Her gaze swept over them like the sweep of a falcon's wing. Jon, you lead 2,000 men to the wall. Ride hard through Queensground to Castle Black. Break the siege. Feed them. Return the Watch's oath with our own. Take Torreg as guide across haunted forests. Jon inclined his head. His gray eyes, Eddard's eyes, shimmered with grim pride. I'll need lancers. wildling bow from the weirwood groves, and Val's blessing for the babe. The babe stays, Maester Julius interjected. He would never survive the ride back in these winds. Catelyn nodded. He'll be safe here, as any child of the North. She turned to Toreg. You have my roof, my hearthfire. Help us stand against what you saw. Toreg's shoulders sagged, a weight lifted. My people will fight, my lady. The free folk follow strength. Winterfell stands strong. Plans unfurled like a loom. Wool men provisioning sledges with dried fish and seed oat. Lock archers sewing rawhide snowshoes. Asha departing for Bear Island with Davos embarking on the shivering sea. Reeve keepers prepping messages to every crofter hold. Jones' column ready to march at dawn, bronze rams' head horns hanging from their belts. The yard crackled with urgency like pine logs in fire. That night, Catelyn could not sleep. She paced Winterfell's ramparts, cloak pressed to throat, and listened to wolves howl beyond the walls. Somewhere in the darkness, Nymeria's great pack threaded the forest, bound by a scent older than blood. She leaned over crenellation, breath frosting. Her scar itched, as it always did when storms gathered. Above, the sky glittered unkindly clear, as though daring the land to endure what descended. Footsteps gentle as snowfall approached. Arya took position beside her, hair whipping loose despite the leather thong. Neither spoke at first. They watched a faint line of torchlight snake east. Jon's men setting off earlier than sun. Finally, Arya broke the silence, voice low. Do you think Sansa remembers us? Catelyn's hand slid to her daughter's. She will. The certainty warmed her as no brazier could. She pictured Sansa's bright hair, eyes wide at the sight of Winterfell's walls whole again. Songs pouring from her, as they used to down candle corridors. She saw Bran perched at the heart tree, whispering to ravens. Rickon tumbling through kennels with shaggy black pup nipping heels. Dreams or prophecies, she could not tell. Yet she held them as anchor. We'll bring her home, Arya said, and there was no bravado in the promise. Only simple statement, as if the world naturally followed the Stark will. They stood until torchlights vanished beyond First Ridge. Then together, they descended into the quiet castle, and parted ways. Arya to her bed of wolf pelts, Catelyn to her solar where parchment waited. She dipped quill, and wrote through darkest hours. Letters to Howland Reed, to River Run, to her sister's small tomb at the Eyrie, and one letter she left sealed with no address. Words to Robb, telling him Winterfell lived. Ink dried black as raven feathers. Days bled together as preparations churned. Jon's departure left Winterfell curiously hollow, the way a room loses echo after the chest is moved. Still, repairs advanced. The blacksmiths forged new arrowheads of dragonglass recovered from Snowgrave Gorge on Crannog maps. Maester Julius tested each shard. It hummed cold to the touch. Valyrian lore claims the stone wards off dark things, he murmured. Catelyn ordered half the Stockpoint Knight spears, the rest stored in crypt vaults. Winter deepened. Nights grew long enough that dusk and dawn blurred. On the 7th day since Jon rode, ravens arrived. One from White Harbor, another from Stannis Maester. The first bore grim tidings. A fleet bearing Lannister colors, perhaps allied with Euron Greyjoy, sacked the coast near Deepwood Motte, seizing provisions. The second contained stiffer dread. Queen Silice's Red Priestess, Melisandre, had left the wall with her acolytes, her destination unclear, but rumor claimed she'd set forth to find a king in snow, a sacrifice to her fire god. Catelyn convened council at once. Lords argued, some would recall Jon, others insisted Stannis abandoned. Let him bleed. Catelyn slammed fist. We will not fracture, one crisis at a time. We hold Winterfell. We unite the North. She dispatched Glover's swiftest riders south to harry Lannister's ships, and charged Reed's frog spears to patrol every road for Melisandre's crimson pilgrims. To Julius she whispered, if you learn of her approach, light every tower. Fire meets fire. Evening, when moon rose thin as a reaper's smile, Sandor returned from the Vale envoy. His battered helm bore fresh cracks, dried blood caked one cheek. He staggered into the great hall, Thoros propping him. Mira limp, but breathing. Their words spilled like crushed ice. Sir Nestor Royce murdered, Vale in uproar. Littlefinger's shadow still puppet master, though body never seen. Sansa spirited away from the Eyrie, by men wearing white falcons. Not Royce, perhaps Corbry? And last trace to the fingers. Salt winds howling at her hair. Catelyn's fury seared hot enough to thaw stones. She rose before the high seat and declared, "We ride at thaw, if not sooner. The Vale misrules itself. Stark blood shall not feed their game." She assigned Sandor 50 riders to rest, then pursue. Thoros called upon Arya for guidance, flames kissing his beard. The hall throbbed with resolve, echoing off timber rafters. But that night, new commotion shook the yard. Horns again, 3 long, 1 short. Stranger at the gate. Men boiled from barracks, torches bobbing like will-o-wisps. Catelyn donned mail and strode out, Arya at her side, sword drawn. The portcullis creaked. Defenders leveled crossbows. Snow swirl parted, and a single rider emerged on skeletal horse, cloaked in black furs rimed with frost so thick it glimmered silver. He swayed, near death. Catelyn called, voice carrying, "Name yourself." The rider lifted head, face dusk blue, lips cracked. One eye swollen shut, the other fixed upon her with feverish clarity. "I am Temerstone," he croaked, breath plume curling. "Sworn to Jon Snow, I ride with news." They hauled him from saddle. He collapsed onto straw. He spoke above moans. "Castle Black holds but just. The enemy press from every tree line. We killed shadows with eyes like ice. Lord Snow urges no more delay. He begs the North to send every able spear, dragonglass, torch." "Dull," Catelyn exhaled. A cloud. The decision she'd glimpsed many times in dark corners of her mind now stood before her, gleaming and merciless. March with every soul to the wall, leaving Winterfell skeleton guarded, or risk the living North to save the North's heart. She sensed thousands yet unborn hanging upon the pivot of her next words. Maester Julius knelt by the dying messenger, fingers already seeking pulse. But the man's last breath left between syllables. As if to punctuate the death, a whispering gust blew inside the gate, fluttering the flayed man tapestry they meant to burn at dawn. Catelyn raised her gaze to the assembled soldiers. Many quaked with weariness. Many hungered. But she saw no fear old as the one behind their eyes now. They would follow because stark blood commanded, or they would crumble and let frost bury them. She drew her father's dagger from its sheath, the reflection of flame skittering on steel. With her ruined voice, she sliced the night. "Wake every stable boy, every tanner, every child who can carry water. Melt the snow from round our wheels. Pack salt meat and oats. We ride by midday. Wolves do not wait for the ice to swallow their kin. Winterfell will march as one to the wall." She swept the dagger toward the silent troop. "Those who remain will seal every door and arrow loop. They will bar the gates with iron 15 men thick, and they will pray to every tree and every storm that we return." The roar that answered rattled fresh-set glass panes. Even the wolves beyond the walls joined in feral chorus, echo that slid along spine and out through clenched jaw. All night Winterfell bustled. Smiths quenched new axe heads in snow. Wheelwrights fitted sled spikes. Maids boiled brine to soak leather. Arya moved among them, tying bundles, whispering encouragement. Sandor sharpened his sword until sparks fountained. Mira slept long dreamless hours, but rose before dawn and resumed packing dragonglass knives in greased sheath. Catelyn retreated to her solar only once, to write one final letter. She addressed it to Sansa, wherever fate had scattered her. She told of Jon's march, of Arya's growth into a sword of ice and flame, of her own hope forged anew by fire and snow. She sealed it with wax sculpted in shape of a direwolf head, then pressed her wedding ring, once Ned's, into the soft stamp. She handed the letter to Sandor. "If roads favor you, see that she reads this." He nodded, slipping it beneath breastplate. By daylight half the garrison formed column outside the broken moat's edge. Snow whipped across faces, stinging, yet eyes shone flint bright. Banners rose, Deerwolf, trout, merman, bear, reed, and over them all, a new standard, white fabric, unstained save a single line of dragonglass shards sewn in rising arc, the Knight's Bane banner, symbol of northern unity against winter's shadow. Catelyn mounted her mare, Shadowmare, the horse's mane thick with plated runes for luck. She rode to front line, Arya to her right, Glover and Wool behind. Jon absent but presence felt in every breath. Horns sounded thrice. Gates opened. The march began. Through drifts neck-high, past larches hoary with hoarfrost. Across white knife iced into steel. They marched. The great pine forest swallowed them. An army of ghosts under gray sky. And as Winterfell's walls receded behind, the wind carried faint echoes of hammer against anvil. A promise the fortress would still stand when they returned, or when the world ended. They reached the King's Road within 2 days, a trail gouged by countless migrations. Along the route, abandoned farmhouses sat half-collapsed under snow, hearths cold, chickens devoured by foxes. They passed those by, but left marks of wolf and trout on each door so any survivors would know help had marched past and might return. One frigid dawn, as orange peeled across horizon, they saw turrets of Queen's Crown Keep, its old watchtower cracked by storms. Smoke rose from chimneys. Jon's outriders had lit beacon fires. Outside the palisade stood wildlings and brothers of the Watch, mingled around pits of glowing coals. Crows stood shoulder to shoulder with giants in rag-woven capes, both clutching wooden bowls of stew. The sight stunned woolmen who had never seen a giant except in nightmare. But the oath Catelyn gave, "The dead will not care who we were," burned in their memory until distrust flaked like ice on sunlight. Jon emerged, cheeks raw beneath shaggy beard, eyes bloodshot with exhaustion. He clasped Catelyn under her forearms, forehead touching hers in silent gratitude. When he turned to address the column, his voice cracked but carried. "Beyond this ridge stands the wall. The enemy is not Lannister, nor Bolton, nor Ironborn. It is frost and night, and the despair that eats us if we let fear unmake our bonds. Tonight we stand one people. We fight for hearths we have yet to build, for children not yet born. Follow me, and we will carve dawn out of darkness." "Daemon," they roared approval, stamping spears on hard-packed snow. That afternoon, as sun sank behind ragged clouds, they crossed frozen bogs, came upon the wall soaring slick blue in half-light. Western sky shimmered aurora pale. Campfires dotted the foot like dying stars. Figures patrolled atop ramparts, archers shivering behind crenels. The gatehouse, half smashed during previous attacks, had been reinforced by crude barricades of wagon axles and piled stones. One tower smoked where catapult fire had struck. Snowdrifts mounded high as rooftops along the base, making approach treacherous. Yet from those drifts rose new defenses. Sharpened stakes of pine, rope snares dusted with powder. As Catelyn's host neared, horns answered from gatehouse. Deep, mournful notes, neither welcome nor warning, but something between, acknowledgement of fate shared. Giants loomed among them, fur mantles bristling, raising logs repurposed as battering poles against unseen foe. Children of the forest, small as half-grown hounds, darted along embankments, flinging seed-glass seeds that sparked on impact, leaving trails of pale fire. The sight stole breaths. Many men crossed their hearts, others rubbed talismans carved from weirwood. Jon led Catelyn up narrow stair onto the wall's topmost walkway, a frozen ribbon that soared above storm clouds. The world fell away beneath their boots. In the distance, north beyond forest shroud, they saw a darkness unlike night, a mass swallowing moonlight, moving slow as glacier, unstoppable. Lightning flickered within that gloom, but with no thunder. The silence was worse than any roar. Jon's voice quivered. "They come. All the stories, Mother, true, all of them." Catelyn wrapped fur tighter, looked across the endless white, and felt no terror, only grim acceptance. The world had riven her heart too many times to leave room for new fear. She touched Jon's arm. Below, horns echoed, fires blazed, the last fortress of the living shaping itself for final trial. Night arrived like a shutter over the sun. The first wave of whites lurched from the tree line. Shapes grotesquely human, eyes glowing cerulean. They stumbled across snow, then broke into eerie sprint. Catapults hurled jars of pitch. Archers loosed flaming shafts. Jon's giants hurled stones the size of oxen. Impact shattered bone, yet still they came. Catelyn descended, sword unsheathed, posted at breach where palisade bent toward murder hole. Arya fought beside her, needle flickering. Sandor roared further down the line, Thessal's spear of dragonglass lancing hearts with each strike. Thoros lifted sword aflame and sang hymn to his red god. Melody lost in shrieks of undead. For hours, the tide crashed and retreated. Each white slain burst into snow crystals, or sagged in boneless heap, yet new ones clawed over. Catelyn's arm ached, lungs burned, throat bled anew under old scar as she shouted orders. Twice she almost slipped on ice slick with gore. Arya yanked her back, wordless, eyes alight with fierce joy and sorrow. Toward deepest night, a lull. Undead withdrew, dragging broken remnants away. Whisper traveled. The others approach. A hush as palpable as tomb air fell. The very wind ceased. Then, through drifting flakes, riders appeared. Tall, armored in glassy mail, mounts rib-jutting and hoarfrost maned. Their eyes shone stars swallowed by winter. Blue flame swords, no heat, no light, shimmered in their grasp. One rider spurred forward, blade raised. A cold electric scream erupted from its throat. Snow in its path crystallized into prisms. Men's breath coalesced into ice spikes. Asha, recently arrived from Bear Island hunt, hurled a giant's boar spear. The point pierced the rider's breast. It shattered in burst of shards, mount dissipating in cloud rime. Cheers half died in throats. 3 more riders followed. Jon stepped to meet them beyond Broken Gate, long claw gripped tight. Its Valyrian steel rippled under moon's bleak light. Giant Wun thundered at his side, hefting flaming log torn from watchtower. Catelyn saw her boy, grown yet still child to her heart, walk into death's maw, and she felt the old fear return, this time paired with pride sharper than any sword. The first other raised weapon. Jon parried, metal screamed like glaciers colliding. He slipped, regained stance, feinted left, cut upward. Their cycles blurred, frost shattering sparks of black metal. Finally, with primal roar, Jon buried Longclaw's dark edge through the rider's neck to the hilt. Blue light exploded outward. Fragments spun away like dying stars. Wun smashed second rider to shards. The third whirled toward Catelyn's line, ice blade poised for sweep that would shear 6 men. Catelyn raised her dragonglass dagger. Arya danced past Mother's guard, needle fainting for throat. The other parried, but Arya's movement feigned. Catelyn, understanding, struck low and upward. Dagger plunged into its gut, instant silence, then shiver. The creature fissured and collapsed into wind-scattered snow. Arya's grin flashed wild as dawn. Dawn indeed came moments later, a pale wedge of rose that split the sky like an axe. With sun's first rays, the remaining whites halted, head cocked as if listening to some distant horn. Then, as if order revoked, they crumpled to heaps. Beyond treeline, darkness retreated north, a wounded beast licking gashes left by dragons unseen. Silence followed, broken only by the crackle of burning pitch. The wall still stood. The living breathed. For now, in the quiet aftermath, bodies of fallen friends dotted the snow. Some lifeless, some fitfully stirring. Maesters rushed with salves. Giants lowered heads in rumbling keens. Catelyn sank to her knees near breached gate. Her arms shook. Dragonglass dagger slipped from numb fingers. Arya knelt too, laying forehead to her mother's shoulder. Jon approached, armor dented, face blackened with soot but alive. He offered hand. Catelyn took it, pulled herself to feet. Far above, Aurora unfurled again, now deeper green, tendrils swirling like leaves in spring dream. Catelyn followed its shape until it mirrored the new banner's dragonglass arc. A promise perhaps, that hope could glow in cold places. She breathed deep of air still sharp, filling lungs the river had once stolen. Around her, exhausted cheers swelled, not victory, but survival, each breath carved with sacrifice. Later, hours later, when wounded were bandaged, pyres built, watch rolls counted, they convened in Castle Black's shattered hall. Wood smoke, blood, and salt pork mingled. The child from Bear Island gurgled by hearth, cheeks rosy, warming quick. Giants passed mead horns with crows in patched black. Wildling girls mended torn surcoats next to Maester Julius. Catelyn stood before gathered throng and spoke through raw throat. We saw death, we saw life. We stand between. We will stand again. The dawn no lord can claim belongs to us all. Crow, clansman, fisherman, lady, giant, child of forest. We will hold this line until spring wakes, until the dead forget the sound of living blood. How? No songs followed, none were needed. People sat, exhausted, but at peace with their purpose. Catelyn stepped outside into the purple hush of early evening. Snow drifted. She looked south, toward Winterfell, toward Vale Riverlands, seas beyond, and north, into Kingdom of Ice. Both directions demanded, both promised, and between them she balanced. Footsteps behind. Jon, Arya, Sandor, Mira, Thoros. They joined her at the parapet. No words. Together, they watched the first star appear. In years to come, songs would be forged. The Wolves' Requiem, the Battle of Shattered Dawn, the March of Stone and Snow, but none would capture the simple holy silence of that star blooming over a wall, rhymed with yesterday's dead. In it gleamed every tear shed since the Red Wedding, every heartbeat denied by the Green Fork, every whispered prayer to old gods and new unview. Catelyn closed her eyes, let cold air scald her lungs, and offered silent thanks for the impossible. She was Catelyn Stark, mother resurrected. Heart once stone, now flesh again. And beside her stood children tempered by loss into blades keen enough to cut darkness itself. When she opened her eyes, she saw not the end of night, but the fragile start of morning pushing against the ice. And she knew, certain as winter turned to spring, that home was not mere walls or hearths. Home was the unbroken circle standing on this wall, the breath she shared with them, and the promise that none would face the dark alone ever again. E.K. The wall moaned in the night, its vast blue flanks settling like an ancient beast after hard pursuit. While sentries paced its rag-lined walkways, torchlight flickered through ice like trapped fireflies, staining every fissure amber. The uneasy stillness that followed battle tugged at the nerves of the living. It was the silence of deep forests after lightning, when every trunk waits, expecting more fire from the sky. Yet the encampment sprawling below, Castle Black trembled, not with fear but with restlessness. A sense that no mortal hour could be spared when the dead themselves had learned to count time. Catelyn Stark slept little. She walked the midnight perimeter in layered cloaks, one ear tuned to the hush within the newborn infant's hut, the other to boots crunching snow along the ring-fort palisade. Hard-eye torches guttered in the wind, flaring whenever a gust scarred their flames. She read these pulses of light as one might read sighs from a fevered child, each flare a reassurance that hope still breathed. From the west, the ghostly glow of the wall arched above everything like the rib of the world. Every so often, faint crackles echoed from its face, and a dusting of ice crystals hissed down the sheer drop. In the hours before dawn, Jon Snow emerged from the command tower, cloak swirling in drifted eddies. She saw exhaustion carved into his cheeks, gaunt hollows, purple rings under the eyes. But there was new purpose in his bearing that even the long night could not erode. He paused upon noticing her, then crossed the cramped court with measured strides. "Sleep hasn't found you either," he said quietly. "Sleep kept better watch when we had fewer ghosts," she answered, voice rasping around old scar tissue. "But this stillness is the first I have known since the twins. I won't miss it." His mouth crooked, half a smile. "They sent 20 rangers east to track the enemy's retreat. Tormund insists the others withdraw to muster. If so, we have days, Maybe a fortnight, before the next assault. Next year. Or tomorrow, Catelyn murmured. Jon's shoulders squared. We prepare for tomorrow then. He tilted his head toward the infant hut. He's strong. Maester Julius thinks Val's child will live. And Stannis squats in the king's tower, counting nights as one counts grains of sand through clenched fist. He fears the Red Woman's departure more than the others. Without her flames, his men doubt. But doubt is Bridgewood compared to the dread of the Night's King. They'll fight. Then, he took a breath as if to speak further. Then let it go. Catelyn rested gloved hand on his forearm. Words were too fragile for the weight of death withheld. Her touch conveyed what voices could not: pride, forgiveness, the thin steel promise that whatever else happened, none of them stood alone. Together they turned toward a low ridge overlooking the haunted forest. There, upon a bluff shaped like a wolf's muzzle, the living had raised pyres for their dead, 4 giant stacks of larch branches and torn wagon frames. Giants and wildlings worked side by side with Night's Watch brothers to set the last of the bodies upon the logs. Dawn stood on the cusp, a bruised violet line across the east. As Catelyn and Jon approached, Arya stepped from the shadows of the second pyre, cloak whitened by hoarfrost. Needle hung at her hip, unbloodied now but carefully cleaned, silvery glint at sunrise. She nodded at them, gaze measuring. One says the sky bleeds after a pyre that burns true, she said. He thinks it's the gods chewing the smoke. Jon gave a soft hum. First light is nearly here. He beckoned to Thoros, who already stood with torch in hand, flame flickering crimson. Catelyn watched as lines of soldiers filed in behind, some still limping from battle, others swaddled in hastily mended furs. Giants rumbled low mourning chants, deep as avalanches. Even the children of the forest joined, scattering fistfuls of resin pods over the wood. The acrid scent of dragonglass dust, scraped from broken arrowheads, fluttered in the wind as Julius sprinkled it over corpses, believing it would keep any lingering white curse at bay. Thoros lifted torch high. With one bow from the waist and a murmur of prayer, he touched flame to the first stack. Fire caught quickly. Resin burst in gusty roars, hurling petals of ember skyward. The other pyres ignited almost concurrently, fiery towers against fading stars. People pressed closer for warmth and for proof that each body, friend or stranger, would rest beyond necromancer clutches. The flames revealed faces Catelyn knew by name, and those she had only passed in Winterfell's yard. Lock archers rag-bound shoulder to shoulder. A Crannog spearwife laid among 2 crow boys, a Northmen's stable lad barely 16. She spotted a Bear Island hunter, his beard still tangled with boar bristle. Lord Wool's cousin, felled by a White's claymore to the spine. A thread of guilt wove into her thoughts. Lives laid down on her orders, on the faith borrowed from her surname. Yet pride soon followed. They had stood, and would again. When the fires burned down to sullen heaps of coal, a hush settled so profound, even sparks hissed softly. Sunrise bled at the horizon. Thin, pale marigold smolder. Yet behind the pyres where the smoke curled, streaks of deeper crimson inked the lower clouds. Arya nudged Jon, grinning. Maybe one wound's right, she whispered. Catelyn breathed the smoky air, felt tears sting her eyes not from grief alone, but from the rawness of wood smoke on frost-cracked skin. There was healing invisible hurt, open wounds the entire host could share. She closed her eyes, whispered a Tully prayer to the rivers, to carry all these souls beyond the wall of life and death alike. By midday councils began anew. Stannis rode south from his makeshift camp to Castle Black, escorted by a meager retinue, Queen's men, and a dwindling knot of knights, whose tabards carried the fiery heart of Auror half scraped away after Melisandre's departure. He dismounted stiffly in the melted slush of the courtyard, eyes throwing sparks at every sign of northern authority, but bending no knee. Jon greeted him with formal courtesy but little warmth. They convened in the Lord Commander Solar, now repurposed for joint war council. Catelyn, Brynden Blackfish, arrived from Queenscrown 2 nights after the battle. Davos freshly returned from Bear Island, and Asha, still smelling of salt and boar musk, took seats around the heavy cedar table. Davos reported first. The giant's boars had indeed ravaged Mormont fields. He and Asha had led Bear Island warriors to fell 2 beasts. Their hides now stretched for shield leather, their tusks bound for spear points. Lyanna Mormont, small ruler with voice like thunder in a keg, pledged 24 of her best archers and swore again to the dire wolf and trout. "If House Mormont has but 10 swords," Davos quoted her, "10 swords will fight the darkness." Stannis muttered, "The girl is steel." "She is north," Catelyn corrected quietly. Brynden produced a map, pointing to raven scrawls from the trident. Riverrun's banners marched north under Tully colors, riverlords at last united against the frays. Lady Stoneheart's stories had fired villages like wildfire. Catelyn Stark reborn, avenging the slain. Bryndon's lips tightened, half proud, half uneasy at the myth. But he brought tangible proof. 1,000 hill knights from Stonehedge and Raventree, marching through the neck with Reed permission. "The neck will slow them," Jon said, "but they'll bolster our lines come spring." Stannis tapped a gauntleted finger upon the wall's crest. "Spring is a word for poets. It is deep winter at our door. My scouts found an ice fissure eastward, 3 leagues wide, where the enemy gathered. The longer we wait, the more dead they pull from frozen rivers." Catelyn met his gaze. "We've just prevailed. Our men scarcely breathe." "Snow breathes," Stannis replied, "else he'd not be in this room. The wall must be held by fire or steel. My smiths still cast scorpions in oil cauldrons. Yet wood is lacking, oil scarce. The north has timber." "So does the haunted forest," Asha said, leaning forward, braids swinging. "Felled trees there drag to the foot. Make their own dead defend us in death." Jon considered. "Working parties beyond the wall risk ambush. Giants can guard them." Arya's voice sounded from the doorway. She strode in without invitation, brushing soot from her sleeves. "They owe one blood for his fallen kin. They'd rather fight with axes than watch humans freeze behind stone." Stannis' nostrils flared at the intrusion of a girl, but he said nothing. Catelyn saw, behind his stern mask, grudging respect for the lithe killer who'd toppled another. Plans churned into evening. Sandbox barricades across wide swaths, boiling sap cauldrons that hardened on impact, dragging glass mines buried in snowdrifts, joint patrol routes, pairing Night's Watch with free folk to keep suspicion at bay. Davos suggested using Bear Island pitch, thick, smokeless, to coat arrow tips. Brynden advocated fast cavalry raids north to intercept White Walker envoys, if such things existed. When Stannis rose to depart, he paused before Catelyn. "You hold many crowns in hand. Do not let them cut your fingers from reaching too far." She dipped her chin. "I have no use for crowns, only hearths. A hearth cannot rule armies, nor can a frozen iron chair." Their eyes locked, winter to winter, until Stannis' lips tweaked almost. Not quite. A smirk. He turned, boots crunching frost, and strode out into dying light. Night again. Asha found Arya in the abandoned rookery, waxing needles for crossbow strings. Feathers littered the floor, dry quills snapping underfoot. Asha leaned on the icy sill, staring at the shimmering wall horizon. "My father would have offered you to the drowned god after one glimpse," she said, voice half teasing. "He feared girls with knives more than dragons." Arya smirked. "Your father lacked proper fear of wolves." They spoke of Bear Island hunts, how Asha skewered a boar's eye from 40 paces, Arya recounting her dance with whites. Laughter echoed among empty cages, strange music in haunted stone. It was the first laughter Catelyn heard since the twins. When she passed by later that night, seeing her daughter's smile returned, she knew, lit a torch in places that had lain dark years. Across leagues of snow, in the Vale's moon-veiled passes, Sandor Clegane and Thoros of Myr huddled among wind-blasted rocks, their party of 50 concealed from mounted patrols wearing falcon livery. Sansa's trail had gone cold south of the Fingers, lost in a storm that swallowed tracks toward the Three Sisters. But Thoros flames coaxed in a tiny iron brazier whispered riddles of a maiden of snow stranded on cliffs above black water, hidden in a holdfast called Old Castle. Clegane crushed the brazier lid and set his jaw against the wind. He would find the girl if he had to hack through every gold-dropping splattered knight in the Sisters. Back at Winterfell, now garrisoned by Reed and Manderley men, Melisandre arrived under cover of moonless sky, her red robes cloaked by a traveler's muddy cloak. She passed gates unchallenged, a single escort behind, their hoods masking fiery tattoos. The guards, seeing only weary pilgrims, let them through. In her satchel, wrapped in velvet, lay 3 dragonglass candles, black as midnight but veined with red that pulsed faintly. She aimed for the crypts, where she believed the true king's bones were turning in secret. The North remembered treason. Melisandre remembered prophecy. Some fires, she whispered, must be fed with ancient blood, lest the Lord of Light turn his face away. Deep below, Bran Stark, no longer a boy but an awakening force within the weirwoods, felt the current of her arrival ripple through roots and stones. In his chamber somewhere high in the bowels of the old Nightfort, he opened clouded eyes and spoke a raven's croak to Hodor's giant ghost, no longer flesh, yet ever near. Fire woman hunts bones. We must not let bones burn. The ghost giant nodded, shiftless shadow, waiting for the final parting of his tether. Bran's green sight carried vision of tunnels flaring red with sorcerous glow. And beyond that, the Night King forging through blizzard haze toward broken ice spires. All pieces converged. At Castle Black 2 dawns later, Jon's scouts returned from the ice fissure with grim news. The enemy was not regrouping but building. Far within the split glacier, they'd erected totems of polished human bones. Spirals mirrored after symbols, the children of the forest carved into weirlog faces. In the largest spiral hung 3 living men, Ranger Ollo Lobhand, Wildling Tala Croweye, and King's man Sir Humphrey Harling. Frozen to pillars where their blood crystallized down their armor like ruby stalactites. Their eyes burned blue, yet they still breathed, bound in thrall. At intervals, White Walkers approached the prisoners, pressed palms to their chests, and whispered through snarled vapors. Each whisper deepened the blue flame inside. Jon interlaced fingers on map table, knuckles whitening down. "They're making commanders," he said. "Trying to birth new lieutenants, the way they did with Craster's offspring." He slammed fist. "We cannot let them succeed." Catelyn stood beside him. "We break their spiral, destroy the prisoners' bodies before the transformation is full." Her voice hardly masked revulsion. Stannis objected. "It's a trap, clearly. They want us to launch raids into their coal." Jon looked up. "So we burn the trap." Giants dig tunnels down to southerly side of fissure. Free folk archers provide cover. Knights watch lead salvage teams with dragonglass axes. We end it before dusk tomorrow, while the dawn thaw softens the ice. "Nan derwai." Catelyn touched Jon's shoulder. "I will ride at your side." He frowned. "Your place is here, to keep the host in order." Her eyes hardened. The North needs to see its banners unafraid. She saw the protest in his lips and added, "And you need someone to cut you free if you fall." He allowed a half smile. Snow thawing. They rode before dawn. 200 horse archers, 4 giants harnessed with rope ladders and picks, 60 Knights Watchbrothers armed with dragonglass, 100 free folk skirmishers wearing bone charms, 20 children of the forest who glided over snow leaving no print. Catelyn, Brynden, Arya, Jon at front, with his black wolf banner. The fissure yawned across a frozen lake, several furlongs wide, ragged lips of ice descending into blue shadow. Frost gales whistled out of its depths, like the breaths of ice dragons. The spiral effigy stood on a dais half sunk into the crevasse, skeletal pylons jutting at wicked angles. The 3 captives hung there, their moans faint beneath wind. Giants hammered ice stakes for ladders. Archers loosed flaming shafts at wights that staggered from pine lines. The children launched burning seed globes that hissed and spat greenish flames. Under the chaos, Jon, Arya and Catelyn descended rope ladders, Brynden close behind, while giants belayed. They found footing on a narrow shelf just below the effigy. Cold turned breath to brittle clouds that shattered on their lips. Jon raised torch, revealing captive faces glazed with hoarfrost. Olo's eyes flickered, then he rasped, "Kill us!" Blue fire shuddered in his pupils. Without hesitation, Jon plunged dragonglass dagger through the ranger's heart. Blue shattered into white sparks. Skin cracked, body crumbled to snow shards. Brynden dispatched Ser Humphrey similarly. Tala Crow-Eye, the wildling girl, clutched Jon's wrist before blade struck. Her lips mouthed something. North, then she smiled as dagger ended her transformation. Almost immediately the fisher groaned. Ice seemed spiderwebbed underfoot. From the depths rose a shriek, pure, ecstatic cold. A figure emerged, taller than any before, armored in overlapping plates that shimmered like crystal moonlight. The Night King. He clutched a spear forged from black ice, edges jagged like lightning petrified. One on ledge above roared, flinging boulders. They shivered midair, disintegrating before touching the king. Frost pulsed from his body in concentric rings, freezing arrows, extinguishing fire. Children of the forest chanted, but their green flame was snuffed like candles in gale. Jon stepped forward, Longclaw humming, Valyrian, steel hungry. Arya circled left, needle ready though small. Brynden covered flank. Catelyn realized all archers and giants above now struggled to find purchase on cracking ledges. Wind howled deeper. The Night King raised his spear. A sweeping arc of ice energy flung Jon back against stone. Plates of his breastpiece fissured. Arya darted beneath the second arc, lunged for thigh. Needle glanced off armor. She back-rolled, snow spraying. Brynden tried crosscut. Spear parried with effortless flick that tossed Old Knight into abyss. Only rope saved him from plunge as he dangled, coughing. Catelyn saw path. 3 dragonglass, throwing knives at her belt. She flicked first. Shard spun, nicked the king's cuirass, black ice flaring. Second, she flung at wrist, forcing spear offset. Third, she clutched, meaning to drive point if Jon distracted. Jon rose, half-winded, switch-gripped sword, two-handed. He feinted high. Night King anticipated, answering with spear thrust. Jon twisted, blades scything upward across joint of armpit, sparks of midnight stone. Ice mail cracked. A shrill keening escaped the king. First true sound, save wind. Arya sprinted, leapt, planted boot on stalagmite spike, catapulted over spear's sweep, and slashed downward at vulnerable joint Jon revealed. Needle plunged deep, tip protruding inside chest cavity. Blue mist erupted. The king backhanded, she flew into snowbank. Catelyn's moment. She closed distance, driving dragonglass dagger into neck seam with both hands, twisting until hilt bit glove. Ice-armored plates liquefied where blade rested. Night King's eyes burned brighter, then shattered, blue shards scattering like azure fireflies. His body fissured, collapsed inward, spear clattering to ice then crumbling to snow dust. Silence dropped. The world exhaled frost. Above, whites convulsed. Disassembling where they stood, wolves howled far away. The forest seemed to thaw in an instant, though still deep winter. Giants roared victory. Brynden hauled himself up. Arya limped but grinned feral. Jon knelt, head bowed. Catelyn steadied him, palms on his shoulders. "Is it over?" he breathed. "I don't think winter ends in a single breath," she answered. "But we have taken its heart." As if to affirm, the fisher's walls groaned, then began to collapse slowly inward. They scrambled up ladders, giants pulling ropes. The spiral dais sank, burying itself beneath ice rubble. Soon the lake sealed behind them, steam curling from cracks, before refreezing smoother than before. On ridge, Stannismen, free folk, Night's Watch, and Northmen gazed in mute shock at the stillness. Asha tilted head. "We kill the king and his soldiers crumble. Either gods are lazy generals, or that was prophecy." "Nyashenis," Thoros muttered, light's flame-guided blade. "But I saw many hands." He looked at Catelyn, and Arya, and Jon. "Rollers winds blow around you." Giants beat chests. Children of the forest wept emerald tears that froze into crystal seeds. That night, they set camp not at Castle Black, But along the southern banks, fires dotting the ice fields like a new constellation come to ground. People from every blood shared stews and stories. Catelyn walked among them, hearing laughter where yesterday had been wails. She found Bran's raven perched on a post, cawing thrice, as if proud. She sought Bran next at Nightfort Passage. He sat upon a litter borne by two huge free folk. Hodor's ghost hulking behind like silent ward. Bran's silvered eyes fixed on her approach. "You severed the crown from Winter," he said, voice older than his years yet lighter, almost childlike. "The dead will remember, but they will not march soon." Catelyn knelt, smoothing his blankets. "Rest comes at last." He shook head. "Rest for North, but the realm turns. Sansa runs across islands of stone. Dragons stir across sea, and the Fire Woman hunts bones still. We must bar crypt doors with more than steel." "None." Catelyn brushed hair from his brow. "Then we will. Together. Starks do not fade." Bran's cracked smile warmed her. "Mother," he whispered, "the heart tree dreamed of this. The snow, the wind, your hands in blood like red leaves. But it dreamed also of green buds after. There will be spring." She kissed his forehead. "There will." Days became measured by thaw, rather than blood. They reforged rampart gates, stacked dragonglass in vaults, laid new signal pines along ridges. Stannis sent ravens to every holdfast. The Night King destroyed. Noble houses who once ridiculed tales of ice wraiths now penned trembling replies pledging men coin, grain. Jon named Tormund Giantsbane commander of Free Folk Rangers, forging charter that granted wildlings homesteads south of the Wall in exchange for watch duty. Many northern lords balked. Catelyn mediated, brokered oaths of guardianship that wove free folk into North's tapestry. Asha sailed back with Davos to Winterfell, bearing boarhide banners and Lyanna's archers. She discovered Melisandre's theft of crypt keys. Together with Reed scouts they tracked her to Shuddering Pass, intercepting just as she prepared blood ritual over Ned Stark's bones. Dragonglass arrow through her shoulder, spilled black-red flame, extinguishing her spell. She vanished in a storm of smoke, leaving candles dark. Ned's bones remained undisturbed. Winterfell breathed easier. Sandor and Thoros reached Oldcastle on Sisterton Cliffs, where Sansa, disguised as a falcon maiden, had held reading court for fisherfolk while planning escape. The sight of Sandor's scarred face split her careful composure. She ran, burying face in his ragged cloak. He grumbled about bloody birds, but his hands shook as they wrapped around her shoulders. Vale Knights, discovering their prize lost, pursued. Thoros' flaming sword deterred them long enough for ships disguised as gull colors to slip north. Sansa's arrival at White Harbor weeks later set dock bells ringing like wedding chimes. Spring tiptoed south of the Wall slower than anywhere else, but buds pushed through snow at the foot of ancient weirwoods. Children of the forest sang to them in a tongue men could not hold in memory. Giants hauled timber for a new hall at Queenscrown, a gathering place for free folk and crows alike. When ice melted from Barrow trenches beyond Winterfell, Catelyn rode home with Jon, Arya, Bran in his sled, Sansa cloaked in gray-white, and Rickon, found by Reed scouts on Skagos, wild eyes almost feral but fiercely alive. They passed beneath the gate of Wolf and Trout. Winterfell roared a greeting. A great feast spilled across Bailey. Barrels of Manderley ale, boar roasted on iron spits, river pikes stuffed with rosemary, Sisterton crabs hauled overland in ice chests. Distant horns announced arrival of river lords. Laughter mingled with harp music. Giants lounged on hillocks outside walls, sipping goat stew from troughs. In the great hall, new rafters yet smelling of fresh pine, Catelyn stood before high seat. She did not take it. Instead, she guided Sansa, Bran, Jon to dais. The North saw in one glance lineage unbroken, tempered by night's chill. Cheers shattered rafters. Snow dust cascaded. When noise subsided, Catelyn raised hand for hush. "We have walked from sorrow into shadow, from shadow into dawn," she said, scar voice resonant. "We have learned the Wall is not border but bond, that crowns break, but hearths mend. Tonight we remember, tomorrow we sow. Let spring find fertile ground in north. She lifted cup of green ale. To the living, to the fallen, to the pack. Hear the pack, voices thundered. Later, when torches burned low and music drifted softer, she walked God's wood path. Heart tree stood under moon, trunk white as ghosts but leaves blood red, buds of green emerging between. Bran sat at its roots, Hodor's ghost a lull behind. He smiled. The tree said, "Thank you," he whispered. Catelyn touched a leaf. Its surface, though chilled, carried hint of life beating. She closed eyes, ready at last to breathe. The river of memories swept by, calmer now, no longer dragging her under, but carrying her forward, toward seasons she once thought forever lost. Behind, her children's voices rose. Sansa singing soft, Arya laughing at Rickon chasing Pup through fallen petals. Jon's low murmur to Davos. Stannis, re-debating roads. The world still ached, but the ache felt bearable beneath this canopy of red leaves and starlight. As she turned to rejoin feast, frost crystals crunched underfoot. She glanced upward. Snowflakes drifted but melted before touching her hair. Somewhere far north the wall still stood, jagged scar between worlds. But its presence no longer tasted of doom. It felt like a sentinel breathing easier after long vigil. Spring, Bran had foretold, and she believed him. For the first time since the bite of steel at the Twins, her heart beat without a stone's weight. It fluttered, soft, swift, as though remembering it had once been bird, not burden. And so she walked, head high, ready to write new chapters on parchment, not yet stained by tears. Hopeful that the quill carved from Winter's Wing would inscribe something brighter than firelight on ice, a tale of wolves that survived night and learned to sing again beneath the warming sun.